Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Outworld Broadcasting's coverage of the Sandown 400 for the 2023 ASR Supercars Championship. It's round number 9, and it's a split round across 2 days of racing. Last night was qualifying and the 2 race for the grids, which has set the field running order, or the starting order, for today's 129-lapper endurance race. 2 drivers per team, per car for today's encounter, and there's 2 more of these types of races to come in the next few weeks. The 500 at Bathurst and the 500 at Pukekohe. As I welcome Benjamin Rhodey Rhodes to the box alongside me for today's broadcast. Rhodey, it's a little bit of a different feel for us because it only comes around a couple of times a year where we actually broadcast during daylight hours rather than the usual nighttime time slots we've been accustomed to over the years. But it's necessary because it's a longer race and therefore we can't squeeze it into a nightly broadcast. So it's over to the drivers to get themselves coordinated and figure out how on earth they want to slice and dice the next 129 laps.
Absolutely. Good, I'd say good evening, but yeah, you're right, it's not evening, it's daytime. Good afternoon, everyone that is watching along at home. And yep, I'm having the same situations. I was signing off to the guys in PBF and I said, good luck with this night's racing. I went, hang on, no, it's still daylight out. It's not tonight, it's today. It's a weird one that throws us. We do it a couple of times each year, and yeah, the Enduros are the reason for it because we're running a much bigger distance race. The biggest we'll tend to go on a single night, 100 Ks, and we're doing double that in today's racing. So, yep, a nice big long chunk of distance for drivers to get used to. Not quite the classic 500 Ks worth of distance in one race at Sandown, but 400 Ks is still definitely more than enough for some of these drivers to learn to deal with. Yeah,
absolutely. It's been a bit of a different sort of look and feel with the Sandown round this year compared to years gone past. In Enduro Cup a couple of years ago, Sandown did have points awarded for the 2 races that occurred last night, which were the race for the grid encounters. I think they were about 50 points each back in the day, and they contributed toward the overall points tally for that particular event. But that was when Enduro Cup was standalone. This time around, because Enduro Cup is part of the Supercars Championship, the points don't get awarded for those race for the grids. They are essentially heat races just to qualify and get the cars in the best position possible for the race today. But it didn't go according to plan for a few drivers and a few teams last night. There's definitely some faster guys starting at the back for today's race.
Absolutely, yeah. We saw this coming out of the first race for the grid, where a lot of those were almost predetermined by the nature of the qualifying, or the driver appearances that were available last night. Quite a few teams only had their one driver appear last night, which meant the driver was able to qualify and in theory run race 1, but you can only run one of the races, and race 2 being the one that determined the starting order for today's racing is the one that everyone picked. So for the most of those drivers ended up towards the back in the, they all end up towards the back in the start of race number 2. And some of them didn't progress forward as much as they'd like to. We've got the likes of Kurt Stenberg starting down in the pack with Zach Brown. Lewis Wedding made a bit of a charge up but didn't quite get up to the front. I think Brennan Ross is buried somewhere as well. The only one from that large group of cars that really managed to push through the field was Brenton Foley, who will be starting 3rd with Phil Boak.
Yeah, and that's the big key, isn't it? Some of those drivers that kept their nose clean in race number 2 of the grid races last night actually benefited massively from the melee that happened on lap 1, turn 1. So lap 1, turn 1, it was lap 1, turn 6 through down to 9. Ultimately, those were looked at overnight. They were actually deemed to be a bit of a racing incident. So just a culminating series of events. There was, I think, 3 sets of cars going 2 by 2 up towards turn 6. And all the drivers that were in that little sort of group of cars, one driver tried to let another driver through on the inside and give right of way to the car, which was probably the right thing to do. Unfortunately for him, that meant that it checked up all the other cars behind, and they sort of really had nowhere to go and not a lot of time to react, and it was just a cascade effect. So no one wholly and solely to blame. Like we initially looked at and thought that 1 or 2 cars might have been that kick-started the whole thing, might have been at fault for that, but having a bit more of a serious look at it, definitely no malice intended, and they've managed to escape that. Just the one penalty overnight, which is essentially amounts to a grid swap position, which was between Noah Turrer and Lewis Wedding. Just out of the final corner, there was a little bit of a nudge and a bump and run there, and ultimately it meant Lewis prevailed to the line for P5, but those positions have been reversed as a result of the contact. That was deemed to be an unfair gain of position.
Yeah, it was assessed. I think I saw a report. I missed jumping in actually to call on them as such, but I did see some of the reports afterwards, and it was something addressed to be similar to what we saw with Mark Winterbottom and Tim Slade at the last corner of Gold Coast a couple of years ago, and I think a lot of guys know that one. That was the one that Wingcup made a bit of side-to-side contact or front-to-rear contact with Tim Slade as they came through the long left-handed at the final corner at Gold Coast, and as a result, Winterbottom got the run to the line and picked up third position, which was then reversed, I believe, in the same situation. Actually, was reversed, and it was Tim Slade that was promoted up to third instead.
Yes, I remember that vividly back in the day. Actually, that was one of those things that you don't see it all that often in main game supercars in real life, but it does happen from time to time. Let's actually have a look at how the round structure actually goes ahead for the Enduro Cup rounds. We looked at this last night because it is indeed a part of the Supercars Championship. So the top half of your graphic there is what took place last night. There was the qualifying session, then the 2 grid races. So essentially, the finishing order from grid race number 2 is the way the main race starts today, with that little exception of the change of position that did happen between races, between the end of that race and this morning. We've just come out of a 2-hour warm-up session, so drivers have been in there practicing pit stops, working out the pit sequences, how they're going to slice and dice it, when they want to do their driver changes, what tyres they want to run. And you can see here, these are the key bits of the puzzle. So there's 129 laps at 400 kilometres total distance of racing. In actual fact, there's 500 total distance raced across the 2 nights. That includes the 2 grid races last night, but the main race is actually 400 kilometre affair. Every driver has got to complete a minimum of 52 laps. That is 40% of the race distance. It has been the case in Enduro Cup for the last several seasons that each driver's got to complete 52 laps as a minimum. So in theory, when you look at it, one driver, if you were trying to get to minimums, you would be looking to try and get a driver maybe to do the stint getting up to about lap 52, 53, and then you'd get your main driver in to do the balance of about 75 odd laps, maybe give or take a couple, just depending on how your sequence goes. So, you could split it that way. You can split it across multiple ways. It just depends on how you want to do it. And then the big piece of the puzzle is a car to be classified. The car has to complete 80% of the nominated race distance. So you have to have completed 104 of the 129 laps. You have to be running at the checkered flag, so you can't be sitting in the pits as a non-finisher with 104 or 105 laps on the board. You won't get any points. You have to be running at the checkered flag, so it means you're going to be multiple laps down if you've got the 2 minimums. And both drivers have got to be have completed their minimum requirements. So you can't have one driver that's completed, 70 odd laps and one driver that's completed 30 odd or 40 odd and get to the checkered flag. Both drivers have got to have met their minimum lap requirement to be classified to get full points. And then, of course, if there's a red flag situation, which is not listed on there, we revert to, the full points being awarded provided 80% of the nominated race distance has actually been achieved. So a couple of little permutations to look out for today, I should say. I'm going to be getting confused throughout the life of me for the thing. I think, Rody, you and I have spent way too many nights awake to sort of go, well, here we go. We've got to try and work out, it is a daytime race, not a nighttime race. So plenty of permutations to look out for. 2 compounds of tyre in play, so how the hard and soft tyre comes into play, which we'll talk more about in the next couple of hours as things go and unfold. And we'll be able to see who's running hard and soft tyre today as well, Reddy, because the compounds are actually marked. So white tyres on the side of the car or the white sidewall markings for the hard tyre and the yellow for the soft. So we'll be able to keep an eye out on just who has picked that strategy and deciding to run a little bit longer versus going for the grip.
Exactly. And it's something that I was talking with some guys beforehand, and we were weighing through the options of where a hard and a soft tyre sits, and sort of thinking about it from a driver's perspective, which is sort of why I was talking with them, because I'm not thinking about things from a driver's perspective necessarily. And there are still instances where a hard tyre might become useful, but it's one of those things where the pace and I suppose how the car sits, and importantly, the difference between the length of a soft tyre run and the length of a fuel tank run is not necessarily sufficient that a hard becomes an automatic 50-50 option. I think the hard has a place, and we will probably see one pop up here and there. Like as we mentioned, if we're worrying about maybe like a car with a driver being, and particularly if they're trying to specifically keep to the 40% driver minimum for a car, there might run their secondary driver out there on the hard tires and, run a few laps, pick up fuel, and then run to the end of that then full tank. But outside of some of those unique use cases, I think most of the racing will probably occur on the soft tire, simply because the difference between a soft tire run and a fuel tank run is only a few laps. It's not much. And the other thing is, with the way the pit stops are set up, your a fresh set of fresh tires is covered under a full tank. So there will be small instances, I think, where the hard tire will be used, and basically will be used when people are planning on doing a double stint or a more than one stint on their tires. But otherwise, I think most of the racing will occur on the soft tires, but it will have the opportunity to spot that in real time.
Yeah, and I think that's the case I'm expecting to see as well. I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of drivers definitely go for a hard tyre compound somewhere along the line. I don't know who it's going to be, but if drivers are smart enough, they will have worked backwards from the original starting point they would have worked backwards from the finishing point of the race and worked out, okay, we have a soft tyre that lasts, say, 22 laps. We have a tank that lasts 25 laps. How do we want to do this? Are we going to be losing too much time as the tyre on a stint gets too badly worn? And then do we work out, do we need to slot a hard tyre in there somewhere to make it work? Because you're looking at roughly, I think the soft tyre is going to work. You'll get some drivers that'll probably try and sprint on less of a full tank and maybe do, say, a couple of 20-lap stints and then maybe a shorter stint to try and get another driver out of the car. And, if the safety car comes out as well, you're going to end up with some laps that'll be gained back. There'll be laps where you'll be able to get a few changes done there as well and get a few laps back and maybe meet your minimums.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well, is just because it's an enduro, you don't automatically think, all right, I'm going to run out of tank or I'm going to run out of set of tires. The softs do have a pretty good window of use. I think I was talking with Brap earlier, and probably the best assessment of pace for someone who's not driving this weekend, having run at the front of Super 2 and getting some straight clean running, probably the cleanest running of anyone on the soft tire so far this weekend, because he was checking up out the front of the field pretty comfortably. But he was sort of in the window of, I think, about lap 16 or so was where he was starting to find a bit of tire drop off, and then sort of through to about sort of lap 20. Obviously, lap 22, lap 23 is where the softs can go to. We saw this with Scott Murrell in the second race on Friday. But yeah, 16, 20 is probably the realistically usable window. It depends on who you are as well, I suppose, as to where you find life in the tire. We might actually find, and it will be a unique instant case for maybe some of the guys a bit further down the back, some of the guys that, similar position to me, maybe aren't quite getting the full pace out of themselves or the car at a various point. I found an instance on Friday night in the second race especially, where I was out there on some very used tires, but because the car was relatively light on fuel, I was actually quicker. Well, I was quicker than I should have been, and I was matching my times from the earlier in the stint, which is what in my case enabled me to effect an overcut on some of the guys I was racing. But yeah, it's one of those things where just because the logic dictates, okay, I want to make this stint as long as possible. Practically, that might not always be instant when it comes to racing, and it's not about doing the necessarily. It's not necessarily about doing the minimum pit stops, particularly if that number is the same across strategies. It's about having the fastest race time. That's what wins enduros. I mean, getting to the end is one thing as well. We've seen across the many years we've run enduros, engine pops, disconnects, everything that's happened to drivers. We saw this last year at Bathurst, errant driver swaps where the AI took over instead. You've got to get to that point first. It's still a race it's still almost, we say this with Bathurst, it's very much a 5-hour event to get to the final stint, and then from there it's a race. Similar kind of thing here. You kind of have to get the car into the window of the last 20 or so laps, and then your race is actually on. Up to that point, it's almost still a game of survival.
Yeah, that's right. And it's all about building up to that, so those last 20 laps. So basically get to about lap 100, and that's really where you need to start thinking about your strategy. You need to have sort of bought your ticket to work out, okay, we now know that a stint maybe might be 22 to 25 laps. It's a 129 lap affair. Where do you take that final stop, and how do you do it in amongst all the other drivers that are doing their stops as well? So it gives you the best opportunity to come out and then just blaze on to the finish. You've got to have that strategy well and truly sorted. in those closing sort of last 20 to 25 laps. As we have a quick look at how the driver standings actually shape up coming into today's proceedings. There you go, I nearly did it again. We looked at this last night, and Rhodey, you mentioned that this is where it's going to make or break the championship aspirations for One Will Devonish at the top of the order, because the teams have gone and front-loaded a lot of their main entries. So the two CRE Engineering Mustangs have actually got not only Devonish and Egmanis aboard one of them, but they've pulled Noah Turra and Lachlan Locke into the other one to bolster it from a team's point of view and from a tail gunner point of view. But it really is going to be about how Devonish and Egmanis team together today to extract maximum points. And at the moment, they're doing quite well. They've ridden their luck really well yesterday, and they're starting from the first position on the grid.
Yeah, so yeah, you're right. And for a lot of the guys, there are still some thoughts about teams championships, even outside of the obvious two being CRE and the Pixel boys. Even for sort of the guys that maybe aren't too worried about a team's standings point of view, we've got the Beyond team. They've shrunk themselves down a little bit from what we've seen, but they're still running two cars. The second car is just at this stage going to be a Pookie entry, but the first car is Tim Renner and Pete Thrower, which are obviously the two main drivers for the Beyond Racing main team. And then in the case of PBF, Brenton Foley and Phil Boak, they're not really necessarily the main drivers, but with Zach Brown on the move not on the move, he's been lent to Pixel. We'd very much like to have him back at the end of the Enduros, but he's been lent to Pixel for the Enduros. The sort of the two main, and especially the two, well, I think probably one of the longest consistent pairings in Enduro Cup is back together. And then, we've got the likes of some of the Dev Series guys filling up the rest of the roster. But it's sort of been the idea, is to really sort of try and put all the eggs in one basket. It goes back to the sort of the early days. I say the early days, to be fair, it was up until fairly recently. We go to the classic days of supercars endurance racing up to sort of the mid to late 2000s, where there wasn't a rule that mandated you had to have somebody from sort of outside the sport as a co-driver. So you'd have exactly that. The lead car would be, for example, it'd be Tander and Scaife one year. And then you'd fill it in with, the HSV dealer team car drivers perhaps in the second car, or you'd get two complete relative wild cards or some rookies and fill the car out that way. Whereas opposed to currently, in the way that sort of we visualize enduro pairings of working is, an A driver and a B driver. Whereas in the practical case, a lot of these pairings aren't really A's and B's. Will and Termo, pretty line ball pairing. Dane and Hayden, you'd think there's an A and B there, but Hayden has actually not done terribly in his own racing as well. He got up to third in his co-driver race before Dane brought up to second. Foley and Boki, that's an interesting one. They've both been at the front of the championship before, but it's been a little while since that last happened. But they both do have the pace to stick with it. Hall and Dostal, probably similar pace in the end. Hall's been running Supercars, Dostal Super 2, but Dostal's turned it on quite recently in Super 2, when Hall, we know where his pace was at from Super 2 last year, so perhaps a little bit similar there. Just looking down the roster of the order, Tara and Locke, we know where they've finished in the championship. Brunswick and was supposed to be Burke, but it's actually Lewis Wedding filling in for that car. Lewis has been out of the seat for a little bit, but we know where Lewis's pace should fall into, and he does kind of like to tailor himself more towards being an enduro driver rather than, or at least for this year, he's tailoring himself more towards being an enduro driver now that he's been shuffled out of his regular season seat. Steve Burko, and it was supposed to be Pete Savage. Late news on that one. It's actually Matt Cecil jumping in for Pete Savage. He's having late pedal dramas. So Matt Cecil will in, but we saw Matt Cecil have a very strong return to form on Friday night. He's sort of spent most of the year around sort of the Super 3 pace, which for someone who, was sort of more tipped to be having a crack at a team's title this year in Super 2, isn't ideal, but he came to Sandown, he turned the wick back on, and he rediscovered how to go quick in a Dev Series car. So he's perhaps on a better swing of form, and also he's got that to sort of buoy himself into and carry into the weekend itself. And I think to finish that out, Brown Angus pretty close on pace, one Super 2, one Super 3, just by virtue of definition. Brown and Stenberg, definitely a stronger driver of the two, but Zach wasn't doing a poor job against Termo, so I think you do a poor job to consider Brown as a definitive number 2 there. And then, as I mentioned, Tim Redman and Peter Thrower, pretty close on pace, but a little bit slower, but Enduros isn't necessarily about outright pace, it's about consistency, and they've both got that covered in spades.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm just having a look here. There's a number of drivers just taking to the track here during the warm-up session just so they can get last-minute practice starts and things going on as well right now. And just having a look here, Rody, this is starting to give us a bit of an insight as to who is actually going to be starting these cars for the race in a few moments' time.
Exactly. So just looking at this set at the moment for who we've got in the server, we've got Nathan Higginson, who will be starting for the Beyond Racing Young Guns. Termo will be in for CRE Engineering. Tim Redmond starting for Beyond Racing. Brendan Ross in for one of the Real Home Pixel Racing Team cars. We've got Brandon Dostal starting his entry with Ben Hall, who has made it today. Which is good to hear. Just seen Dan McKenzie popped at the top of the list. He'll be in with Hayden Cuppett. Hans Brunswick jumping in with, as I mentioned, Lewis Wedding. Damon McDonald in with the carry space with Darryl Callahan. I'll only go to the top 10 of the list as it sits now. Lockie Lock in with Noah Tara and Kurt Stenberg starting with Zach Brown. And so, yeah, there's a mix there. There's definitely, I think, an instance for some of the stronger drivers or perhaps some of the more experienced drivers where the option exists. The exception to that in that list is Brandon Dostal, but I imagine with where they're at with Ben Hall, having just, I think he is still carrying an injury to some degree. He's probably they're right at the window with that car where he's going to run the 40% and not much more. So I wouldn't be surprised that they're giving Dostal a chance to start the car, also just a bit of experience around the Supercars driver, but also give him a chance to start the car, get a sort of distance in, and it also gives Ben a bit more time to prepare for his driving. He'll probably jump into the middle of the race where things tend to be a little bit quieter.
Yeah, and they were the surprise packets yesterday as well. Even though Dostal didn't take part in the first grid race, he actually qualified pretty well in the qualifying session, but then kept his nose clean and ended up being, top half of the grid finish, and therefore a reasonably good starting position for today's race. So I don't go as far as to say they're a dark horse just yet, but definitely in a strong position to take it up to a number of the drivers in that early part of the going, and especially with some quicker drivers behind them in the field. They can make use of some good clean air early on and just settle into a nice rhythm.
Yeah, I think the only person that comes out a measure of Dostal on Friday was Brapp, who checked out and just bit at the front of the field. But Brapp's pace is very much leading into being a Supercars driver next year. And to be fair, we tend to see that the last couple of years, the lead pack of drivers have ended up moving up to Supercars in the following season. Depends on where the sort of lines are drawn coming into next year. But if Brapp has comfortably run in Supercars before and not run off the back of the field, so if the only person that's quicker than Dostal in Dev Series is someone who would finish at a top 10 in Supercars, he's not in a bad position. He's probably just outside the top 10 on pace. He's gonna have to get that out of a distance race. Ben's gonna have to pull his part as well. But yeah, maybe not necessarily to win, but the way some of those races go, they could be in a good position to keep it clean and still have the pace to eke out some good positions.
They certainly are. Now, just getting some word through that the session is actually just advancing right now, so there is a small change to the schedule. There was a couple of little late-minute server patches that did need to go out in time for the race today. Unfortunately, they were just sort of a couple of those things that were ID'd a bit late in the piece and some unexpected issues. So warm-up was 2 hours actually from 11 a.m. Eastern time this morning. There was a quick little session there just for the drivers that are starting the race to get themselves sorted, get themselves in the cars, and they are now getting ready to start this race.
Yeah, so at this point, drivers will be affirming their race start strategies. They'll probably already be programming in their first stops. You can queue up to 3 pit stops, but you don't want to plan too far ahead in these races. If you get buried into a strategy and a safety car or something else comes out that influences you, it's very hard to adjust on the fly. So you really only want to sort of set your next immediate stop, which most drivers will be doing either now or on the formation lap, which will be setting up fuel and tyre swaps if they're planning on doing one. But from there, it's very much a sort of plan as you go picture.
It certainly is. Sandown looks beautiful, and so do the cars, and here we go. So grid is rolling on the formation lap. Rody, this is your territory. Off we go.
So starting from pole is Curtis Ekmanis, aka Termo for CR Engineering in the Moffat number 151 Mustang. Starting alongside him will be Dane McKenzie for Surrey's Esports by CRE, sharing with Hayden Cuppett for today's action. Third is Brenton Foley sharing with an equally pushed Phil Boak. They both had a big night last night, not actually lined in with what they were doing in yesterday's racing, but they've definitely a bit second hand today for PBF France Engineering. Fourth is Brandon Dostal, the surprise package out of yesterday's racing. He's setting up that car pretty well for Ben Hall to jump into later for Sierra Anson Motorsport. Fifth is Lockie Lock, sharing with Noah Turra for Sierra Engineering in the Green-Eyed Monster Throwback. Sixth is Hans Brunswick, who missed yesterday's action, but will be starting from sixth with Lewis Wedding in Lockie Burke's place for the Pixel team. Seventh is Steve Burke of Theory Performance with a late fill-in of Matt Cecil to appear later in today's action. Eighth is Jesse Bennett for Skill Issue Racing. He and Angus Brown did what they could out of yesterday's racing to set themselves up well for today. Ninth is Kurt Stenberg for the Fuchs HSV dealer team. He's working with Zach Brown in today's action. 10th is Tim Redmond, who's sharing with Pete Thrower in the Beyond Racing Mustang. 11th is Leonard Grossel, who is working with Stuart McNichol in the PBF Stern Sport Commodore. 12th is David McDonald, who's sharing with Daryl Callahan in the Amdup Racing by CRE number 6. Alongside him is his teammate in Anthony Green, who's sharing with Darren Loughlin in today's racing. 14th is Cam Rutledge, who's sharing with Daniel Cox in the number 915 Sierra Anson Motorsport Commodore. 15th is Brendan Ross, who is sharing with Luke Rosella for the 888 team. 16th is Nathan Higginson, who's sharing with Bailey Hall for the 00 Beyond Racing Young Guns Commodore. 17th is Luke Speck sharing with Steve Warwick in the 45. And 18th is Ryan Smith, who will be sharing with Kai Jones in the number 66 KDJ Commodore.
Well, there you go. That's the grid. They formed up here. It is time for the Sandown 400. 18 cars, 129 laps, and we are underway here at Sandown Motor Raceway. And the jump goes to Dane McKenzie off the front row of the grid. Good reaction time, clear head of speed, and clear bit of clear air ahead of Egmanis at the start there. And he launched the number 119 beautifully away, and already has a couple of car lengths gap going into turn 4. Great start.
Yeah, that was a majestic start for McKenzie. It seems that the curse for poor starts has stuck with the car rather than just with the driver in the case of Will Devonish, because Chemo, not quite the run he wanted off the line. He's now got the rest of the train to deal with, starting with Hans Brunswick. Brandon Dostal's actually managed to stay on pretty well. A little bit of a squabble in the back, I see. Kurt Stenberg already trying to fire up a few positions on the start of this race.
Certainly is. So good head of steam heading down the hill. So Egmanis, poor launch, and actually hasn't really come under too much threat from Brunswick, who himself has had a really good start. Jumped up ahead of Dostal. Oh, and there's some contact already around at turn 9. There's a bit of a drama here. Redmond caught, and an early safety car. So not something we were expecting to see there. There was definitely a little bit of contact, and something happened down at turn number 9, but safety car grabs control of this field very, very early on as we look to the Outworld Broadcasting replay to get a bit of an idea about what unfolded heading down the hill into Dandenong Road. So Redmond's the car in the pink and shot there. Oh, he had a bit of a late moment. Oh, okay. So, and then got nerfed for his trouble, and then that caught up Brendan Ross and caught up Kai Jones. So looks like a driving error coming down the hill from Redmond and avoiding trying to get into the back of, I think that was one of the Amped Up Racing CRE Mustangs. And as a result, unfortunately, comes a bit of a cropper and impedes a couple of other drivers after spinning out there. So not turned himself, but then taking to the lane, understandably, after all of that. And I think Brendan Ross, and he also came into the lane as well. So early stops for damage repairs and probably for a new set of boots as well.
Yeah, I think what happened there was just the train checking up a little bit. You know, it's one of those things, it's a 129 lap race. You say it, but you have to keep saying it sometimes to people. And I mean, we're both drivers. We both are guilty of it at times as well. That you don't win it on lap 1, but it doesn't impact the ability sometimes of there's a spot, I can go for a spot. A spot would be easy. It's nice to get one right now.
I'll tell you what I've just noticed as well. Yep. Early driver change. Luke Rosella in, Brendan Ross out. So that's a very interesting strategy ploy. And now I'm going to have to reach for the notepad and start taking some notes here as to who's done what. Because now the ruling here is that the in-laps count. So when it comes to pit stops and pit stop sequences with the whole 52 lap minimum, the pit in laps do count. So that means Ross has only done 1 lap in all of this, and he's the only driver that's come into the field in the field that's come in and changed over. So yeah, very interesting early strategy play for car 8888.
Yeah, I imagine, I don't know, perhaps they're trying to bind something later. I don't think that was a planned move because you
No.
don't necessarily plan for, oh, actually, I've just seen a confirmation from Scott Nolan in the chat. That wasn't actually planned at all.
No.
That was
Oh,
something
here we
that
go.
must have been set up as yeah, so they must have set themselves up as passenger swap earlier in the session just to cover themselves off for later, if they needed to make a quick swap. And it must have been Ross coming in and missed an option in the pit menu. So Rosella's in the car, but Rosella didn't plan to be in the car. So
No.
we'll see. But they might still work that into a strategy option. I would have thought it would have been perhaps been a bit of a move to try and sort of shore up positions in the early stages of the race, considering that Ross is by no means a slow driver, but Rosella is still a slightly stronger driver in that pairing, and perhaps there's a bit more of an intimidation factor from Rosella. A lot of people know what his pace is like, and perhaps might think twice before sort of taking the fight up to him. But yeah, in the end, that was totally not anything like that at all. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. That does mean there's one more lap. So if a safety car falls mid-stint later for Ross, he might have the magic ticket where he's done one more lap than everyone else that he's racing against, and he might be in the window. But I don't think that pairing is one that's looking to do a 40-60. I think that's probably going to be closer to a 50-50 pairing.
Well, there you go. There's the proof of the stuff up. Brendan Ross is back in the car. So that is a bit of an unusual twist. And I was with you, Rody. I thought, okay, maybe they're down the back of the pack. They're going to hand it over to Rosella and see how far that he can get through the field and maybe bring them back up through all the traffic. But importantly, what that's done is they are now like right off the back of the train here. And I think the safety car is going in this lap. So they're not going to be hitting the back of the pack at speed. They're only coming up the crest of the hill down into turn 6 now, whereas the field's about to take this restart. And Mackenzie's got control of the field. And Redmond, I've noticed, is just getting onto the back of the train as well. I think he may have pitted for a second time as well. Now, importantly, they haven't gone a lap down, so that's the important piece of this puzzle as we get back to green flag running here with Mackenzie leading the field to the line and start lap 4. So Ross is just coming round the final corner, or proper corner now, as the field goes down into turn number 1, and Redmond did catch up the back of the pack. There he is on the back of the train. So, and there's how far Ross is behind. So he's got about the length of the front straightaway to make up on the grid.
Yeah, he's got a running start, maybe not quite as well executed as we saw for a yellow flag there as well.
Oh yeah, no, we've got a car, around in the back there. Jesse Bennett and Skillichu
racing around there at turn 3.
Yeah, so we just saw that as that was happening. So he was just off the line. So no safety car for that one there, and I think that might have been just a mistake all of his own.
Quite possibly, but yeah, in the end the field's got away pretty nicely. Mackenzie probably not looking for a safety car restart this early, but he's managed to execute very well. He's managed to pull a bit of a gap out on Curtis Igmanis as well. Train very much in the order it was coming to the restart. Bit of a battle going on there down the pack between Kurt Stenberg and Lockie Lock over position number 6. Yeah, that just exchanged to the final chicane complex as well. So Stenberg up to P6, so that's a good gain. They've gained 3 spots out of the restart there. Hans Brunswick's gained a couple as well. Lock's not going to be done with here. He's going to look down the inside of Stenberg at the first corner, but it's a long race. They've got to be careful with how hard they want to fight this early on, as Burt goes very wide over the back of the curb at 1, and that makes sure that Grossel can defend that position going into the first chicane. Yeah, they were sort of going 2 by 2 there. Locke trying to pull similar moves on Stenberg as Grossel trying to pull on Burko in the end. Burko perhaps worried out of it a little bit by the presence of Grossel, who's now actually putting the fight up to Lockie Lock with a poor exit at turn 4. Yeah, he's in the back of the shot here, where it's on board with Stenberg, who's following Foley down into turn number 6. And look at the gain. He makes a very, very good gain heading down the hill here, but the wise veteran knows when the opportunity is there to pull the pass and not the opportunity to pull the pass, and now he's right on the rear boot lid of Foley, and we'll have a bit of a look at the inside here for turn number 11 and smartly up the inside. So twice in 2 laps, positions gained at the final chicane. Absolutely. I don't think Foley was looking to fight that too much. It is only lap 6 now of 129 laps, so you're not going to decide the race here. But at the same time, Stenberg is comfortably a little bit quicker than where Foley's going to fall into, so it wouldn't make sense to battle too much. But the battle is still going on, raging on behind. Lockie Lock, Leonard Grossel and Steve Burko tied in a 3-car scrap over 7. There is, and for a little bit of time there as well, Brunswick had a good run out of the final corner, but couldn't make anything of it, any headway over Igmanis. And he's now dropped a little bit of real estate
to the number, or the position number 2 car, the 151 Mustang, and actually falling into some pressure from Brandon Dostal here as well. So early days, really got to just get into this rhythm. This is the hard bit too, because the safety car came out rather early, which would have sort of disrupted the momentum. It hasn't had a negative impact out in front though. Mackenzie has definitely pushed on, and he's got the margin out to nearly 3 seconds at the moment. So this is a different sort of a tactic compared to what we're seeing as Stenberg at the back of shot there looks up the inside of Dostal just at the last sequence of corners. He couldn't quite get that done that time around, so couldn't make it 3 positions at that same complex 3 laps consecutively. But he's there, and he's definitely putting some good times on the board. Fastest lap so far, believe it or not. Have a look at the race pace at the moment. Now, we were talking about this last night, Rhodey, and the race lap record from last year, which was set in non-Enduro Cup condition, was a 6.8 in the hands of Rosella. Mackenzie's already set a 7 flat, a 7.003, if you don't mind me asking. So I dare say our predictions about seeing a potential race lap record fall are very much on.
Yeah, and the impressive thing as well is Dane's out there doing that in completely clean air, which helps for the cornering, but definitely hurts down the straight, so he doesn't get that toe. But I was going to make the point of that. He's done similar to what we saw from Rapp on Friday. He's very much just checked out the field. Perhaps a different strategy and play between the Subways Esports by CRE car and the CRE factory team car behind him. But yeah, I didn't expect to see Dane check out to necessarily that advantage that early on. And I didn't expect, as we're seeing a bit of racing right now, I didn't expect Brandon Dostal to be hanging on as well as he is.
He's doing really well, but he got a little bit of a nudge on the back from Stenberg. I think this will be the opportunity that he needs down the inside at turn number 1 if he can make it stick in, out, duck back into the line here, and then skates it through. Over and under treatment coming, is it? Yes, it is. Brandon Dostal very much awake to that. That's a beautiful bit of driving, just to realise the mistake of your competitor, just slip back underneath and make the over and under work. That is very, very, very sensible driving right there.
Yeah, that was beautiful driving. I mean, Dostal, he hasn't set himself up really to jump into a supercar. I think this is definitely his first or one of his first couple of times in an enduro, and he's very much been a Super True driver, but sort of a bit of a sort of racecraft beyond his race start number, as a way of putting it at this point, because yeah, he's got the pace that he's not immediately getting rolled by Stenberg as he's just been wobbled off the curb.
We were just looking at the group behind and then keeping an eye on him as well, and he just went a little bit deep at turn 9 and gave the position up. But you know, that's a sign, I think, of things to come. They're not going to be overawed by the occasion. They're going to definitely just put their head down and give it a good crack and see how far they go.
Absolutely. Just having a look at the live chat, and we've got Pete Savage in, obviously not racing today with pedal dramas, and he's sort of the eyes and ears, I suppose, for us in what's happening within CRE. His assessment for Dane is that Dane's very much trying to pull away and set himself up, less also to set himself up well, but set Hayden Cuppert up well, because Hayden Cuppert Cupid not as quick as Mackenzie. So definitely trying to set him up where he's perhaps got a bit of clean air to work into for his first stint, to sort of measure up that gap and sort of control the drop-off to the cars behind. Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, you're right. For the car that's out in front, which is this one, the Panorama Graphics backed Sideways Esports by CRE Machine, this now becomes critical because Mackenzie's going to do the opening stint here. Now, at least, when do they hand over to Cupid, and how do they get his laps out of the way? So I think they've already identified, and you think, you're right, it's pretty clear. Cupid's no slouch, but he's not got the pace of the likes of Will Devenish, Luke Rosella, Brendan Ross and that. So they need to find a way to get him into the car in a smart position, get his laps out of the way, and then get Mackenzie back in. Because he's the one that they're going to be wanting in at the back end of the race to hold a candle to some of those quicker drivers. And right now, it's just common sense. Like, I'm looking at the attitude of the car and the body lines and the flow of the car. They're not doing anything too rash. They're just keeping the speed up, just keeping the momentum going through the corners. They're not asking too much of the car at the minute. It's rewarding them at the moment with a 5.5 second margin. And I mean, last time around, their lap time was an 8.2. And they're still the quickest of all the drivers out there. There were only 4 drivers last time around setting PBs, and the best of them was an 8.4, and that was Kurt Stenberg. So they've definitely got some good pace in hand at the moment. Yeah, Dane's in a really good window, and it's one of those things where Dane's one of those drivers who you kind of know has the pace to do well, but isn't really set up in a good position to do it. Sometimes he's stuck in packs, or he's stuck racing with people that, to be fair, he'll contribute to it as well, but the racing gets a little bit willing, which impacts the ability to set clean laps. But yeah, this is sort of the prime opportunity for Dane, not only to sort of prove to others, but to prove to himself that, you know, I am worthy. And he sort of had that sort of internal debate the last couple of years, but he can run at Supercars pace. He can run pretty comfortably up the front. That said, he is going to start to get fed into a little bit now because Kurt Stenberg's just put the move on Curtis Igmanis for second place.
Yeah, now this will be the key telling statistic here, won't it? How, now that Stenberg's managed to make it through clear air, it's a 6 and a bit second margin right now. Just how far can he go? Just what sort of lap times can he produce? So keep an eye on that margin there. It is 6.16 seconds first to second place at the moment. Last time around, Stenberg did do another PB. It was an 8.4 compared to the leader's 8.1. Now we'll get a real clear indication of how much time Stenberg can gain. Now the important bit there is that Sector 2 is pretty much a nothing sector. It's basically from the exit of Turn 4 all the way to the top of the hill at Turn 6. So you really don't gain or lose a lot of time unless your exit is so much better than somebody else out of Turn 4. So the gap usually stays pretty static, and that's what it did on that particular occasion. You'll gain it through sectors 1 and 3. You can see here already two tenths of a second gained just in the last sector alone. It's now down to 5.9, and it was the first time that it was a slower lap for the leader, just 1/10 the difference. So a tenth up in sector 1 and 2 tenths down in sector 2. So that's all it was.
Yeah, I think what we're finding was sort of how finely tuned and sort of how sort of finely on the limit we're finding the 119 is very much perhaps a car that's going to be dependent on the tyre life and a bit more dependent perhaps on the cars around them. We saw the cars sort of further back in the pack getting a bit sideways, a little bit out of shape and still attaining pace. But if Mackenzie's aiming for sort of the on a rail driving style to get the pace out of the car, that's very much reliant on having good tyre underneath him. He's been pushing very hard, so he'll be using a bit of time, maybe not as much as the cars behind him. You know, Kurt Stenberg will have chewed through a bit getting through the field.
Oh.
But, yep.
Little bit of a moment there for Higginson and for Burko coming through Turn 6, and Higginson's off. He's gone off. He tried to make the pass happen. He's now had to rejoin the circuit. You've got to keep it out of the tyres and out of the wall, and he does just that, but he's lost about 4 or 5 spots after all of that. So he goes from potentially being in position 8 back to 15th. After all of that little exchange, and all from his own doing, making a mistake coming down the hill, a little bit of side-to-side contact. Yes, I can see the L plates on the back of the car, but they're not going to give you any brownie points for that excuse.
Yeah, give him a hard slog there early on. Just you know, it's a long race for Higgins, and he'll be able to get the car back into the picture as the race wears on. But very much just an early sort of chink in the armour, as it were, very early crack into the mindset that you just get back into, to get back in the zone, get back in the rhythm. He was still on the back of the train. He's got Brendan Ross currently in front of him, who's making his way up through the field, and he can tack onto the back of Rossi as he moves his way up. Yeah,
and at the head of that little group of cars as well is the Super 2 competitor Anthony Green. So he's got Tim Redmond behind, who's not made any real moves at the moment, just quite happy to sit in behind the number 10 amped up racing by CRE car at the moment after that little earlier incident. So in this pack you've got Green, Redmond, then behind him is Damon McDonald, who's sharing with Darryl Callahan, and then you've got Brendan Ross and Nathan Higginson. So I'm a bit surprised that there's a bit of not the huge amount of pace difference that the Supercars competitors normally have over the development series drivers isn't really showing here in this run. But I'm wondering whether there's a fuel conservation strategy piece in play here, whether Redmond and maybe Ross, who's looking down the inside of McDonald here, is going to get that move done. I'm wondering whether Redmond's just quite happy to sit in the draft of the number 10 for the moment and just save a little bit of fuel, maybe when it comes to a tyre stop, because fuel is the limiting factor, whether they're going to get maybe an overcut or an undercut situation here where they don't have to put in as much fuel at the stop, but tyres, when they start to drop off, they'll pull the trigger.
Absolutely, yeah. I think they're sort of in the position, you're right, sort of trying to buy some fuel for later in the races. But perhaps where the thinking is for Redmond, that's that he is shaping up for a move now on Anthony Green, trying to go up the inside, and very easy position to set an authoritative move up there, sort of very much worry the guy on the outside, because you can't really go too wide there comfortably in this. You're very close in terms of just knowledge of, better wording there. But unless you're really comfortable with the guy you're racing against, you can't comfortably go too wide at a corner like like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. So through goes Redmond, and I think he probably decided to pull the trigger then because Brendan Ross has now started to latch onto the back of the amped up racing Mustang as well. And just looking rearwards here from the Mustang to Brendan Ross, looks like this is probably going to be a move in the next lap or so. Looking down the inside of one, no, tucking back into play here. Oh, lock break from Green there, heading up the thing, and Ross will now look at this down the inside here at turn number 2. And there he goes, tries to go up the inside, but there's no real estate there for him. Now the other side at turn number 4, no real estate there either. And now Higginson's getting interested.
Yeah, very much. Ross very much trying to sort of make hay while the sun's shining. Not so much sort of waiting for a perfect opportunity, very much trying to take whatever he can get with Anthony Green. And, you know, Dev Series runner, maybe not, you know, trying to put too much of a fight up, but at the same time, Green's very much, at the same time, you know, he's not afraid to try and prove his worth in the picture. I think, you know, SES perhaps have Supercars aspirations later in the year.
There goes
with
Ross.
Anthony Green in the picture.
Ross down the inside, so to Higginson.
Ross, which opened the door for Higginson in the end as well. He's very much, as I said, probably trying to tackle the back of Ross and move his way back up through the field.
Yep, and he's going to have to go the long way here. Nathan Higginson, that's good because it puts him on the inside for the final corner, which is good, and it'll put him on the inside now for turn 1. So he set that move up beautifully, but he didn't count on Dave McDonald trying to buy into this one as well. And now it's 3 cars wide heading down the front straight this early in the piece. And who's going to come out with it? I think Higginson might have to be the smarter one here and just tuck in behind Green, and he does just that as Green sweeps in, and a little bit of wheel contact there as well. So I think Higginson did the right thing there. He decided, he said, you know what, I'm in the sucker hole here. I have to back out of it. There's no point trying to force the issue. And, well, that was the smart call, I think. You don't need to try and win the race or win the position that early.
Yeah. I think it might have been a little bit of incident of front and rear contact between Higginson and McDonald as well out of the corner. But yeah, Higginson had the run off the inside, but it was a really tight run. It's a hard one to get onto the throttle in an opportune way. So what that did was sort of slowed him up. It slowed Green up because he was sort of out wide, and McDonald was set back from the pair of them and had the best run of the lot.
Certainly did. So a few changes in the upper positions at the moment. Leonard Grossel's moved his way forward in all of this. He's moved up to 5th now, ahead of the second of the CRE engineering cars of Block. Brunswick's gone a bit backwards since his great early start. Doston's just sort of moved into position number 8, just heading in the back of this little 4-car group. The top 3 or 4 drivers are just starting to skip away. The margin out front's actually stabilising a little bit. It was coming down. It was down to about 5.3 at one stage, which is where it is now. But it's not going up or down at any great rate of knots. And there's only like about a tenth or 2 difference in the lap time between the top 2 drivers at the moment. So in some cases Mackenzie's a touch quicker, and then in some laps Stenberg's a bit quicker. So I mean, I'm looking at the timing now and just seeing that there's only about a tenth and a half difference on this lap. So it's not coming down at a vast rate of knots, but there's some occasions where they're doing their best to hold their own here. They're not exactly slow, but they're slowly and steadily being caught. Actually, last lap was a 9 flat for Mackenzie. They've just gone across the line there. And then looking at the time from Stenberg was an 8.4, so that's a big chunk that time around.
Yeah, a little bit of a difference there. I think what we're seeing is coming to the back end of the tyre window. Stenberg, if nothing else, has a little more experience running through a full stint of tyres just by virtue of having done a bit more racing in these cars than Dane over the last couple of years. But very much, he's still holding his own. He's still
localised
localised
Jello. Sorry, Rody. Localised Jello. We've got a car off the road. It's actually in the fence. It's Igmanis. He's actually gone in. He's gone off the road at turn number 1. Looks like he's looped it. Localised Jello. I'm not sure. Is that car still running? No, it's not. They're gone. They are out.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and have a look. I'm going to guess wall contact that clipped the engine in a certain way, but yeah, that's an odd one. That's very early on too.
Got this on the replay coming up as well. It was under 0 pressure, and I'm not sure if this is a wheel glitch or something going on here. A little bit of a lock brake going into the turn, slid off the curb and into the wall, and I reckon that might have cooked an engine. That potentially looks like it might have been a relatively hard hit, and if you go on board, I don't know. I can't hear the engine running, Rody. I'm not sure if you can.
No. The engine was out as soon as he made contact with the wall. So there's some of the finicky bits with the hitboxes for these cars, and the front areas in some regions are very, very sensitive. We saw this yesterday with Angus Brown, who took a wheel off in one of the race for the grid races. And yeah, that's the other thing that can happen. You can pop an engine. So extremely early on, but We said it yesterday. This is the time that's going to affect the championship later in the year, and that's a pretty big bookmark in it.
That's a massive moment. It has occurred, and it's only 18, 19 laps into this race. So one of the favourites for today's running is out. Big drama in the Sandown 400 very early on. Will Devonish does not turn a lap in this race. And just keeping on things, I have seen Hans Brunswick actually just come into the lane at the end of, was that lap 18 for him. And it's actually coming out just in front of the leader. So, and as they're coming around the final sequence of corners, so there's Brunswick, there's the leader Mackenzie, and then Stenberg behind him. So, I don't know, there's going to be some team games in play here between the sister team and the more senior team.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past as a possibility. I mean, that's sort of half the reason a lot of guys end up teaming up is so you can have drivers through the field, whether it's just for the ability to hear what's happening or ability to, not directly influence action, but, you can sort of set things up a certain way. But to be fair, I have seen Liccardo just jump into the pit window. So I think there's a good opportunity, or a good possibility that he's going to be in a few laps. We did talk about the soft tyre window being 22 to 23 laps based off of Murrell's pace. And Murrell's not slow, but Murrell's not doing the sort of pace that Dane's doing right now. So,
no.
The other thing is Dane's also running with a slightly heavier car. We probably were running a full boat, or a relatively full boat compared to Dev Series, where we deliberately ran under fuel because we knew we had to stop anyway.
I'm actually seeing there's more cars in the lane. There's more cars in the lane right now. So Ryan Smith is in, Higginson in, Dostal in, and Leonard Grossel's leaving. So they actually, there's going to be a drama here because there's a merge issue coming onto the front straight. So this is an overcut situation happening right here. Brunswick pinches the brake going down into turn number 1, and he actually manages to jump Grossel and all of that. So that's an undercut for car number 88.
Yeah, that was very well done from Brunswick. He was trying to cover early from a bit of contact that we missed between him and Dostal, which was explained why they fell out of the top 5. But good work from Brunswick in that pit stop, and perhaps for Grossel either a slightly longer stop due to damage or something, or perhaps maybe not quite picking up the call for the pit stop in time to get into the lane.
And just noticing as well that Kai Jones, I think, has taken over from Ryan Smith as well. So there's a driver change that's happened there. So Smith has done the opening 19 laps, and then Jones has started in from lap 20. So there's a second of the driver changes to have happened, even though if the first one was in error, it still is being counted.
Yeah, so a few other driver swaps have popped up in that as well. Hayden Cupid is now behind the wheel of the 119. So much as we assessed Dane trying to set up an early stint advantage, and then hand it straight over to Cupid, so he'll be getting his laps out in the way.
Yep.
And then just into the rest of the field, I don't think there's been any other swaps occur as of yet.
Yes, Cupid has actually, there's been a bit of a change for position here. I'm not sure if this is because Stenberg's actually, is he in the lane at the moment, or what's going on here? Yes,
he should be in the lane.
Yeah, he is, because Foley's gone around to take the lead of the race. So Stenberg in the lane, and there's a lot of shuffling going on here as well. So it's going to be a bit hard for us just to keep track of who's actually done the minimum and maximum laps at the moment. So Mackenzie is taking care of the opening sort of stint for the car that's on your screen right now. Oh, sorry, not on your screen right now. The car that's on your screen right now, with Cupid taking over at lap 20. Ends for lap 21. So opening first few laps go to Dane Mackenzie, and there's a few other things happening here. Stenberg stays in the car. Surprisingly, I've just noticed he's only leaving the lane now. And that's an interesting sort of strategy ploy as he comes back onto the track. Has he actually lost a little bit of ground? I'm wondering if he has with the sequence of stops.
So it's probably a little bit. There's maybe about a second the difference between where the 119 and the 244 came in and where they've both come out. Perhaps a little bit of an issue in a stop, or perhaps a big
margin went up.
Getting into the lane.
It's actually gone up.
Yeah, the margin's increased for Cupid by about the tune of a second. So
yes,
he'll be setting himself up now to. I'd be surprised if he manages to hold Stenberg at bay directly, very much setting up to give himself a bit of window. But the difference for the effectual race lead is 5 seconds. That's currently battled for 5th and 6th, with Rutledge, Redmond, Foley and Bennett still continuing around. Yeah, now
Rutledge has stayed in the car from the beginning of this, so he's actually leading some laps genuinely here. He hasn't actually come in for a pit stop just yet. Noticing Redmond was in the lane as well as Foley, and Foley stays in, and waiting to see if Redmond stays in the car here or if he hands over to Peter Thrower. And Foley feeding back out onto the track.
Yep, and Redmond has stayed in the car as well.
Redmond has stayed in the car as well, so he's coming out of the lane right about now too. So he's going to come out in front of a battle between the 888 machine of Brendan Ross and Nathan Higginson. So Redmond stays ahead of the cars that he was ahead of before the sequence stops, but there has been a few other things here. All right, so this will be the last one of the scheduled stops here, with Rutledge into the lane, whether he hands over to Daniel Cox or not. And then the only car that's yet to stop at the moment is Jesse Bennett and Angus Brown in the Skill Issue Racing Mustang, so they're going to potentially lead some laps here if they don't come in this time around.
I'd imagine they shouldn't be too far off, but I think they were perhaps one of the... I can't remember if they were one of the cars into the lane, because I think what we're seeing is some of the cars who were into the lane early on perhaps pick up a bit of advantage.
They're going around.
And it continues around again. Either that or just with, as I mentioned, Super 2, Super 3 pace bracket, they're not using their tyres as hard as the guys in Supercars, so they might have a bit more window out of their tyre life.
Or they've started the race on the hards. That's the bit that we don't know. Let's get a bit of a look at the side of the wall here. They're on the white tyre. They're on the white side compound tyre, so they're on the hards.
Oh, okay, that's interesting because I'm not catching that at my end. Maybe it's a graphics issue on my end, but yeah, that would make more sense then, yeah, because I was seeing them on soft tire, but yeah, that would make sense why they continue around. So they're going to push the limit of the fuel tank. Probably did quite a bit of saving of fuel under the stop, and yeah, so they're going to. Well, they're not genuinely leading the race. They're obviously going to come for a stop at some point, but they're on an alternate strategy to most of the guys that we're seeing on track at this point.
Yeah, and I can see people like Redmond and a few other cars I'm just starting to cycle through at the moment. They are definitely sitting on the soft tyre at the moment. Oops, moment for Bennett. Heading down the hill. There goes the race leader. And you can definitely see from the white side compound tyres here. And now he has to wait, and this is the problem. He has to wait for this full train of cars to go past before he can rejoin. Then he's got... Green-eyed monster coming down, and now there's the gap. Now you can get going, and that'll just be getting toward the end of the stint, getting a bit of broadcast airtime. Better not have the TV on, Jesse, or I'll kill you. He's now come out ahead of a couple of other Mustangs, and you can clearly see that they had the white side marking compound tyres on, and then you look at Redmond behind. He's actually got the yellow marked compound on too, so on the soft. So I would expect that the Skill Issue Racing Machine is in the lane. There we go. That's the answer to that question. Field is now fully cleansed.
Yeah, outside of that last little spin on the last in lap there, that was actually pretty well executed. And that sort of thing you've got to do. If you're committed to the hards, it's going to be a long slog, but you need to do the best you can to make the most out of a tank and to get the most out of the tyre set. It'll be interesting to see now whether we see Angus Brown pop into the car or whether Jesse stays in for another stint.
Yeah, well, I dare say we might see Jesse Bennett probably stay in the car, I think, for this one. And the question will remain that they managed to get 24 laps out of a stint of the tyres as well. So that's actually not that far away from getting themselves into a driver change window either. So it's a matter of how they want to split it from this point on. A few drivers and a few teams were having some issues getting the driver swap sequence to work earlier on in practice, and there actually is a change. We've put Angus Brown in the car, so Angus is waiting to drive that car away from the looks of things. I'm just waiting to see them in the lane at the moment if they do drive the car away, or maybe they might have a little bit of whether they have an issue or not getting that car going. There you can see it's just stationary off to the side there. A few other changes.
Yeah, I'd say possibly. They've been sitting there for... I know they're... Okay, yes, there was an issue there because they're out of the race.
There we go. So they couldn't quite get the driver swap executed properly, and that puts them out of the race. The second car to fall, and this is something I was kind of expecting to see with some of the newcomers. They're reading the driver swap guide, practice and execute, and unfortunately did not execute fully in that instance.
Yeah, that is a bit unfortunate. Look, as Bruce made the point in the live chat, there is some positives to take out of that. It can be hard to be patient and sit there after you've had a spin and to let, a dozen cars through. But credit to Jesse, he's had plenty of seat time. He's picked up the right way to do that. It's Angus Brown in the chat just popping in that they reckon from there and everything was executed properly. The driver swap just didn't occur the way it was supposed to. And we have seen a couple of issues that popped up last year as well, and it perhaps is just an age of game issue where there's some stuff that doesn't work as smooth as it used to, but that's sort of outside of our parameters of control anyway.
Yeah, that's right. Let's have a look here. Looks like Brendan Ross. I'm not sure if he's on struggling to see whether he's on the white compound tyre or not. Looking at the lap time that he's just pulled out with an 8.1, I'm wondering whether that actually might be the hard tyre in play, because he's definitely gapped Redmond. He's managed to pass Redmond and Higginson on this occasion, but I can't see the yellow mark compound on the side of that car.
Yeah, I mean, I'd weigh in, but I think we figured out already that I'm not seeing the same thing you're seeing with sidewalls,
right.
so I can't provide an intelligent opinion on that one. But yeah, look, it wouldn't be a surprise. I mean, we've known the Pixel guys in general for thinking outside the box with strategy. They're the ones that are prepared to push the envelope. They're the ones that, prepared to try option C or option D rather than sticking with A and B. So, look, it might be a thing very much at this point to try and settle in. You know, as we mentioned, you've got to get to the last year to get to. Essentially, it's going to be something in the region of lap 100 and 109, 107 is sort of where you want to get to pit from to get to the end from there.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to get to first. And, you know, Ross and Rosella, they've been around that. They're not new to this. They've been around a while, so they know they're very much trying to set themselves up for the end of the race. They're not worried about the here and the right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking at hard tyre running to try and build up, and also to build up some laps, as we mentioned, to get to that driver minimum.
Well, here we go. There's going to be a change for the lead here in the next few moments as well. You've got Cupid is coming under increasing pressure now from Stenberg. The lap times have been consistently quicker from Stenberg, and he's reeled him in quite quickly, even though last time actually was a personal best for that car of an 8 flat. Car in second place. This is not too far away from being a lead change here, and it might happen down at Dandy Road. And I think Stenberg might want to execute this fairly quickly, because Grossel's not too far behind as they head down the hill here. Now the question is whether they throw the defensive anchors. They do, so that's an interesting argument there, but it then compromises them on exit, over and under treatment. Job done. Looks like a car that's got some good set of wheels underneath it, and now just needs to slot back in behind. So at the end of the day, that was a fairly easy pass for Stenberg, a seasoned veteran versus the Super 2 debutant in the main series this year and in the 500. And this will come back to, it'll swing back the other way once Stenberg actually stops, changes over to Zach Brown, and we might see there might be a change of fortunes going back the other way. But for the moment, change for the lead.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see how that battle goes later on as well. I mean, Zach Brown and Cupid never really had a chance to compete directly at peak pace. Zach Brown was already in Supercars by the time that Cupid's pace came out. But the interesting play now coming into it is two drivers that have seen each other on track this year and probably not far from battle as well. Leonard Grossel and Hayden Cupid. Grossel famously fast enough in Dev Series to be promoted to Supercars after one round, as opposed to Cupid, who's just made his way up this year from Super 3 to Super 2. Yeah, we're going to see how that battle goes as well. I think it'll be a little bit more balanced perhaps than we're seeing with Stenberg and Cupid, and that might come down to racecraft rather than outright pace.
It certainly might, and I'm looking at the lap times here as well, and Cupid's last lap obviously a 10 flat because of the defence and the pass, but even if he's doing the standard 9s, looking at Grossel's times that are in the mid-8s as well, I don't think that it's too far off being a change for position here as well. And this is to be expected, because this is what happens when you have two different drivers in the car, and some have a little bit of a different pace advantage compared to others. It's just a natural part of the course as things inevitably happen. As we're approaching the 1/4 distance mark of this race, we're on lap 30. So in about 2 or 3 laps time, we'll be officially 25% of the way through the race, 36 minutes on the clock. So it's actually, or gone already, so it's actually taken a little bit longer to get there than what we thought with that early safety car. And here's an interesting battle. Brunswick coming under fire. Did he just get through? I'm not sure if he did or not. I just sort of didn't quite see it in the back. But he has got Foley and Dostal buying into this one as well, heading up into turn 6. But I just saw in the back a shot coming off of turn 4. There was a little bit of a skirmish going on. Yeah,
no, he was comfortably ahead, and Dostal was the second car in the train and very much set himself up for moving down the inside of turn 4. I don't think it was an entirely unfair move necessarily, but Dostal perhaps maybe felt like he was a bit hard on Brunswick, so he went for the move and then sort of backed out of it again. But that's sort of what brought Foley back and had that little 3-car train, which has now become a 4-car train because Lockie Locks now appeared in the back of the picture.
Yeah, he's slowly starting to close in on this group as well. And then Brendan Ross has made his way through the traffic, and he is slowly starting to range up on here as well. As Foley has a look at Brunswick down the inside at turn number 1, and that's an easy pass there. No chance of an over and under this time. Foley will hold sway into the turn 2 and 3 chicane. So Let's have a look at what Ross's times are doing. So the last lap for Ross was an 8.4, and this group of cars here, Foley's best lap was a 9.5. So Ross is actually catching this group.
Yeah, and I've just seen confirmed from our discussion earlier in the chat, Scott Nolan popping in. He'll be sitting with the Pixel guys, so he'll have the best authority on what's happening there. Bit of contact between Brunswick and Dostal I've just spotted. That was very nearly awkward. You don't really want to lean on the car in front coming into turn 6, but yeah, confirmed from Scott Nolan that they are on the soft tyres, which obviously lies into what we're seeing, that he's catching the train in front. And yeah, Brunswick, again, you know, I mentioned Pixel. We did in the end. It wasn't it wasn't Ross on the hard tyre, but I did mention earlier Pixel, the big picture guys, the out of the box thinkers. Brunswick definitely would probably have the pace to keep with and pass Foley, but it doesn't need to do that right now. So he's maybe not too worried about that. He's sort of set himself up well. Oh, that's a monumental send from Dostal, and I saw that coming a mile away that he wasn't going to make the corner. Yep,
that's a massive send, and now he's got to get back on. That's the important thing. So he gets back on, he drops the spot there to Brunswick, he drops the spot to Lockie Lock as well, and now finds himself in P7 and going to have a rampaging Brendan Ross all over the back of him in the next few moments or so. That change, by the way, that we were eyeing up that was possibly going to happen has happened. So Grossel goes through to position number 2 on the road. And now we get a good clear indication of whether or not car 125 has got anything in store for the Fuchs car number 244. We'll get a very clear indication now of what their relative lap pace is, because they didn't stop that far apart. Whoop, as a little bit of a sideways slip there for the 125 machine off of the final corner. Last lap around, there was about 0.5 of a second difference, and Stenberg's got the margin out to 4.6. So let's see how this unfolds over the next sort of 3 and a bit kilometres.
Yeah, I think definitely, depending on sort of how hard Kurt in turn is pushing it as well, I think there's a possibility that Grossel could bind it out a little bit, but I think realistically the battle is actually for the race between, well, for the race, not so much for the win, but for within the race itself is actually between the 119 and the 125, because in similar position in terms of their fast driver being, you know, a fairly quick supercars driver, someone who can regularly get top 10s, is about their on pace and all that sort of stuff. And their B driver is someone from Super 2 who it has the potential, but it hasn't quite unlocked it yet. Grossel was, sorry, not Grossel. Stewart was advertised to me when he joined PBF as Grossel, but not quite as quick. And he can definitely get into that window, but he's not quite got the outright pace, at least at the moment, in a supercar of Grossel. But by no means is he going to be off the pace at the same time. Same thing with Cupid versus Dane. He's not slow, but he isn't Dane. So I think realistically the battle is going to be between these two. Grossel might be over a race as a slightly faster driver than Liccardo, but we're going to see that perhaps later in the race when the pair of them square up. But at the same time, Cupid's probably a little bit quicker than Stewart. So it depends on where they allot their drivers. It might be 60-40 for the 125. It might be more of a 50-50 for the 119. I think that's going to be the battle we're going to see over the back end of the race if everything else goes to plan.
Yeah, just had a look at the lap times there as well. It was actually a very, very big disparity. It was an 8.2 versus a 9.1 that time around, and Stenberg was quicker of the two. And even just in Sector 1 alone, there's a 3/10, or better part of 2.5 of a second difference between the positions 1 and 2, the cars on the road at the moment. So it's not really working out the way with Grossel with a clear air. He's pulled a small air margin over Cupid, but is not really able to push on with the job and still losing time to the race leader. So you're right, Rody. As much as we look at this now and Stenberg setting up the 244 machine for as best a victory as possible, realistically there might be something else in play here, as Dostal's gone deep down at Dandenong Road, and I think he might, I'm not sure if he's waiting to grab reverse gear here or not, but he's gone straight on. As we go and have a bit of a look at the replay coming up here. See what happened here. Did he blown an engine or something happened down here? Or is it just a driving error? Coming down the hill, and car's just gone straight off and out. So I think that looks like meant to blow an engine. That's an engine failure
problem on the downshift, and that's a shame because they were running really, really well.
Yep, he has popped the downshift. Too many downshifts in too short a space of time, and unfortunately, third car falls at this one. So Dostal out, popping the engine So he went to third and to first. We're getting the verdict through from Matt Cecil, who's obviously sitting in that chat with the CRE boys, as he's just had a bad shift. So if he's gone from third to first, I'm not sure if he's running a sequential shift or if he's running the old H pattern, but that is definitely a weird one because you don't use first gear at any of the turns on this circuit.
No, I just went on board. It was, I mean, Matt might have seen better than I saw on the replay, but it was from what I saw, it was fourth to second in very quick succession, and you get good braking in a supercar, but not good enough that you can very easily bang through the gears that quickly. So wouldn't have been by much, but it would have just clipped over the top of the
RPM.
Over the top of the engine dead range, and that was it. And that's it's a shame for Doston. That's going to be the third driver now, or potentially the second driver, to have not gone 20 laps in today. Will Devonish and Ben Hall not turning any laps at all, and Brown only turning, or not even turning a lap. Technically, it actually never went anywhere to begin with as well. So that's right. 3 cars out now today.
Yeah, there was. I just noticed an orchestrated swap on the front straight between the 2 Real Holden Pixel Racing Team machines. So Ross has been let through by Brunswick, and it was a little bit of an easy positional change at the end of the day. So car that's probably got the better strategy or the better strategy options available to it with the driver pairings has gone through to position number 6 here. So smart thinking, or out of the box thinking there from those drivers. And Ross has got a bit of a head of steam here, and the next man up is still Lockie Lock in the 237 machine. So who's yet to take a driver change? There's still majority of the field running yet to take a driver change. The only ones that have swapped so far is Mackenzie and Cupid. They've traded places, and I think Darren Lochner and Anthony Green, I didn't see that swap happen, but they have changed. And Kai Jones and Ryan Smith, they're the only ones that have changed so far. Yes, I didn't notice what time that Lochner and Green swapped, but they definitely have executed that over in this pit stop sequence.
And actually, speaking of pit stops and the orchestrated stop and all that, we've just seen the 88 roll into its pit box as well. So a bit early compared to where we're seeing the other cars, but as I mentioned, out of the box thinking perhaps is what's playing into this. So Brunswick is still in the car. I'm not sure if there's going to be a driver swap, but this would turn into a triple stint if he does stay in the car.
Well, I'm looking at the numbers here. I'm looking at the fact that we're on lap 37 right now, and that I'd say a soft tyre run from here will probably get Brunswick to a comfortable point where Wedding can take over the car. So I'm with you, Roddy. I think this might potentially be a triple stint for Brunswick.
And there it is. Yeah, it will be. So, yeah, that's the thing. I think realistically on pace, then there's not an A or a B potentially in that pairing. So, so I'd be interested to see if that does play out that way. I don't know. Maybe Lewis has done the big sweat, and I wouldn't be surprised he's maybe not had much else to do in supercars in terms of driving for the last couple of months. I wouldn't be surprised if there's perhaps a big sweat in place to set himself up for this, but quite possibly if it is going to be a 40-60 split for the 88, they've lined themselves up pretty well for Brunswick to be at the 40.
Yeah, I think so. As Higginson now comes into the lane and Steve Burko goes through, and he's another driver that's yet to execute a driver swap. And he just had a little battle there with Higginson on the run down towards turn number 6. Higginson prevailed ultimately in that one. And just behind Burko is this little group of cars. So you've got who's that? Darren Lockman, and being pursued by Luke Speck. So that's another car that has yet to execute its driver swap. Luke Speck will be handing over to Steve Warwick at some point, which is the second of the PBF Race Engineering Commodores.
Absolutely, and it's a good little battle here. And I think we found this as well in the rest of the grid yesterday, the first one, that a lot of the Dev Series guys just gravitated towards each other throughout the race, I suppose, because they're not all familiar all that familiar with the guys they're racing against in the Enduro Cup, but they can be familiar with the guys. They got very familiar there, the pair of them. Bit of contact as Specky went for a move up the inside turn 6. Not normally the place you go for a move, but and there was perhaps a little bit of a return to serve there.
Oh, yep, I think there might have been, and there's a redress about to take effect here, I think potentially. Is there, or is no?
It might just be that was the redress, and we'll slow it down and return to. I don't know necessarily what that was. I think it was more Spec maybe just slightly overran the corner and Lachlan wasn't quite prepared for it. But
let's bring it up and have a look at that one, because there was we're actually having a bit of a look at Higginson, who just handed over to Bailey Hall at the time. So here we go down here into. A little bit of side-to-side contact, and then down the inside here, and then he ran the corner. That is a little bit awkward.
Yeah, Darren perhaps just not expecting Spec to be that slow at that point of the corner and just kind of got caught underwear.
Yep, so they're going to continue on and run from
But
there. So yeah, so there has been a driver change in the 00. We're keeping an eye out for that. So Higginson has handed over to Bailey Hall, so that's another driver change that's there. Noticing as well that there is a little bit of moving and shaking in the order at the moment. So Redmond has gone through. He's up to about 4th or so place. And looking to see that Hayden Cupid has fallen down the order here.
He's just been through the pit lane.
He's just been through the pit lane. So there you go. There's your answer there. So there was an early change there. So this might be the middle stint where they get Cupid's laps out of the way as much as possible before handing back to Mackenzie for the final sequence of stints. And this is not a bad strat, because this will be Stenberg as well, who's actually the race leader, maybe coming up to the back of the 119 here. I don't expect that he'll get to the back of him before coming in for another stop, but just looking at the laps, there's been a few drivers come through the lane, and looks like Locke's another one of those, because he is actually right on the rear boot lid of the number 244, but has not been in, who hasn't been for another stop, but he's actually gone a lap down here as well.
Yeah, and another car that we've seen, another driver spot we've seen take place as well, Stu Nichols now behind the wheel at 125. So Grossel's got in, 38, 39 laps, so he's part way to that 52 minimum, but I imagine Grossel's going to do a few more laps here than McNichols, but McNichols now finally into the car for probably at least a stint.
Yeah, at least a stint, and working out how they're going to get the sequence of stops out of the way, because they are international competitors, keep in mind. They're both overseas. So based both in Germany, if memory serves me correctly, Rody.
Yeah, so Leonard's in Germany, Stewart's in England. He's got German heritage, but he was actually at Richard Hammond's workshop yesterday, which is why he missed out on being there for the qualifying night.
Oh, very nice.
But yeah, so both sort of phoning in, as it were, from Germany and England. The EU-AU server connections tend to be a bit average, so they're definitely on the back foot for that. But things pretty playable from there for the pair of them, and they're doing a good job. Yeah, they're actually doing a good job. There's your race leader into the pits, so unsurprisingly takes the bait, goes in. There's actually a fair bit of activity in the lane at the moment, so got one of the CRE amped up cars is in there. Actually, both the amped up cars are in there, and they're going to have to double stack and share. I'm not sure if that's going according to plan. I don't think it actually is. And no. There's a really awkward moment there with the Pepsi Max Mustang leaving the lane, and the 244 from the Stenberg variety departing, and Matt Cecil into the car. So bit of an awkward moment there in pit lane. Yeah, Cecil into the 788. We see Steve Warwick into the 45. Just keep an eye on the rest of the guys in the lane to see if there's any more swaps that are going to be occurring. I'm going to cycle back to get them. McDonald, I think, is staying in the 06. Stenberg continues on in the 244. And Redmond, I think, might be staying in the 43. Yeah, so there goes Stenberg. So he's just got a new set of boots here. So he's coming out at lap 42. So he's actually trying to get, I think he's trying to get as many laps in as possible here. Now, I'm starting to hedge my bets. What do you got there, Roddy? Sorry, I'll update myself. Callahan is now in the 06 and Thrower is now in the 43. There you go. So a couple of changes there. Now, I'm wondering here whether or not Stenberg's going to do well past the minimum 52 laps. He's going to try and, I think he's going to try and get it to a point maybe to hand it over to Zach Brown. I'm trying to hedge my bets on some strategy here and thinking, well, if Zach Brown's got to do the minimum, where he fits into this, I would have thought they would have tried to get the minimum out of the way relatively early, but it doesn't look like that is the case. Stenberg's going to be the first driver in that pairing to meet the minimum. Yeah, we're getting to the point now, just looking through the order, where we're starting to the point of the race where the order doesn't represent where we're actually at. So first on the road currently is Brenton Foley, but we know that Foley's been pushing long in some of his stints. Foley's not necessarily, I think, trying to push to get to a 40% minimum for him specifically. I think it's probably a pretty even 50-50 split between him and Boki. They're very much sort of surprised to be starting off with third as they were, very much just trying to make the best of whatever they've been given. So they're not trying to I don't think they're necessarily trying to optimize to the nth degree a strategy. They're just trying to get some laps in and get some fun out of it. So what that's done with them staying out is put a couple of cars a lap down as a result. But Cam Rutledge is in second. That's not really a consequential or an effective second. The effective race lead, I think, is still with Kurt Stenberg with an 8-second gap over Hayden Cupid. And Ross, if he is on the same pit strategy as the leaders, he's not far off a second place now.
Yeah, he's not far off at all as well as Cam Rutledge go around again. But yeah, the big question mark for me is now going to be, well, there's these two cars on screen right now, the Ross and Rosella combination versus the Mackenzie and Cupid combination. And they've already both been through the lane, and Ross has been on quite the tear at the moment. So how many laps does he actually get under his belt before handing over? That's a real question we need to get an answer to, but there's actually several cars already gone one lap down in these proceedings, and this is all through the stops as well. So there's a few drivers out there yet to stop and to cleanse this field fully. So where Foley and Rutledge really fall into the equation is a real key question here. They both have gone round again, and just stretching their fuel window, I think, as far as they possibly can. Might be a pass about to happen here for fourth place overall on the road as it stands right now, which effectively would be a net P2. And Cupid's going to argue the point through the chicane and comes out the other side. But I dare say that it's a defensive move and a good hold, but for how much longer?
Yeah, Ross set himself up for a move on the inside there of 2, and I thought that was a pretty assertive move, that he was very much trying to be the dominant force there. But Cupid not really sort of bowing down the way I think Ross thought he was going to, and he's definitely fighting the issue now, running him sort of, well, not so much wide, but running him high at turn 6, forcing him to sort of set around the outside. He's probably going to hold him for another lap here, but yeah, I'm not sure how much further. That said, he's put up a good fight. It's
good driving, and I think Foley's just been into the lane as well, so that means Rutledge is going around again, and he has the lead of this race. Boak now getting into the car for PBF Race Engineering, so that's an early, a bit of an earlier change. Foley with a double stint, handing over to Phil Boak as they roar past the lane. There is the Commodore leaving the lane, so it's actually going to come out right behind this little battle, so he'll have a really good bird's eye view of it if he can get a little bit closer.
Absolutely, yeah. He can potentially bind to this as well, depending on how the fight goes on. Second versus the same as the first for Ross, with another move up the inside of turn 2. Cupid again just around the outside, covering the nose off through 3, and similar run now down onto the back straight. The way the guys keep battling, they're eventually going to bring Boak, but definitely Lockie Lock in the back of picture as well. Lockie Lock just behind Boak by virtue of the pit stops, but Lock probably slightly quicker pace on board his Mustang versus the PBF Commodore.
I think, yeah, just a little bit more pace at the moment, but asking all the right questions is Ross, and making all the right decisions at the moment is Cupid. He's just taking all those defensive lines, and Ross knows he doesn't need to do anything silly at the moment here, but keeping the pressure up is important. This is what we spoke about, I think it was a Supercars around at Darwin a couple of weeks ago, Rhodey. It's all about, the pressure and applying it at the right thing. You've got to get the opponent thinking on their feet if you want to make that pass. You need to get them thinking that you're going to do A and then you do B. And ultimately when they make the mistake, that's when you capitalise on those mistakes. It's about, do I send the move up the inside here? Do I hold somebody wide? Do I force them to make a choice that means they ultimately make the wrong choice rather than make the right choice?
We might have just seen that. Oh, it got pretty close to it. We might have seen a little bit of that in play. Ross knew that he couldn't get up to the inside of Cupid, so he wasn't trying to move there. He was trying to on the outside, force Cupid to run late down the inside to try and cover it off. Nearly missed the corner entirely. And only by virtue of the fact that Ross made contact with Cupid through 4, and Ross didn't exactly want to take the position outright because, that would be a bit of a bump and run, is the reason Ross isn't still all through. But at this point, Boak and Locke have both caught them. Yeah, they have indeed. And this has now become a 4-car battle really quick, as Cam Rutledge is now into the lane. So the field being cleansed here. Stenberg going back to the lead of the race. And then this is now the battle for the last 2 spots on the podium, with still a long way to go in this race. And Boak's in the thick of it. Locke's in the thick of it. Remember, that car that's 4th in the queue has not had a driver change yet. Neither has the car that's 2nd in the queue. So there's a few little question marks to be raised out of all of this. Finally, is this the attempt that Ross gets done at turn number 1? I think it might be. He locks a brake, pinches it, has to get up on the curb at turn number 1, but finally he gets that move and makes it stick. Yeah, a little bit of a front to rear there through 2 and 3. Ross maybe not quite as quick as Cupid is planning on being. A late dive in there from Boak. I don't think he's quite going to get the move done there, but definitely through Boak's attempt for a pass there, he's run Cupid wide and very much helped Ross in the end of things. Yep, so Ross now, look at the slipstream city here. As you can see, Cupid gains on Ross. Now there's an attempt here to back out a little bit early.
and get the car turned in. Boat right up over the ripple strip. Is he going to have a bit of a throw down the inside here? No, not at this occasion. I think we're finally going to get the answer to that question, is Ross is now going to drive away.
Yeah, Ross is now the second gap. He's going to be pretty well covered, and Cupid's going to have his hands full now with Boak and Locke from behind.
And now just looking at how the field's actually cleansed out after all of this. Everybody on the lead lap except for Darryl Callahan in 15th place. So he's actually currently the last of the classified runners. And I don't think where is the race lead? I'm looking to see Kurt Stenberg. I think it's actually just put Matt Cecil down a lap as well. So looking at where he is on the track, he has... just potentially gone down. Look, there was a bit of a mistake there. Looks like Boak made an error at turn number 1 and let Cupid off the hook.
Yeah, so that's given Cupid a little bit of breathing room now to work with. He's been running very well, as we mentioned. Doing a good job, perhaps a little bit of a fish out of water on paper, but definitely equipping himself well for not only for the Enduro Cup as things will roll on to Bathurst, but also for potentially any wildcard fill-ins or perhaps a more regular Supercars appearance down the road with some of the guys he's been racing against and battling fairly comfortably with. Little bit of a dive in there from Boakey. I know he's been having trouble getting Dandenong Road right. That was pretty well run. It looked a little bit out of control, but very much Dandenong Road, one of those corners that to do right, sometimes it feels like falling down a staircase.
Yeah, absolutely does. So this battle for 3rd, 4th, 5th still going on. Getting to the point in time where you're going to, if you haven't changed your drivers out, it might be an opportunity to coming up in the next sequence of pit stops potentially to get a driver out, as Boak firmly up the inside this time of Cupid, and he also drops a spot in turn there to Lockie Locke. So that's good news for Locke, good news finally for Boak, and I think those two drivers that definitely have faster cars underneath them potentially can clear away here and make some headway.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes now between Locke and Boak, because I would definitely picture Locke as a quicker driver, and Locke probably, bigger picture thinking was letting the pair of them get through on Cupid before they set up a battle for themselves. You've seen something. Yeah,
almost a little bit of a moment there for Phil Boak coming up down through turn 6 and 7. Car snapped sideways and gathered it up pretty smartly and gets going again and just stays ahead of Locke. And some comments coming through about the performance of Hayden Cupid in that car. Cam Parrott, saying very level-headed and very well done. And I think you and I, Brodie, we both second that. He did very, very well. And as we said, he had all the right questions being asked of him by the drivers, and he was giving all the right answers up until the point where he was ultimately passed. And look, he very rarely put a foot wrong there. Localised yellow flag in this section. I'm not sure what's going on. Have we got a car potentially off the road? Yeah, we do. Yeah, Matt Cecil. Matt Cecil off the road there in the back of shot and just rejoining the circuit. Looks like he might have done that potentially all on his own. We'll go and have a look and see what our friend the replay has to deal with that. And yeah, looks like he just went off the road. Whoops, we wind it back there. As looks like he potentially has gone off the road at turn number 1, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, it's easy enough to do when you're on track by yourself, very much trying to bring yourself into a window of battling with another car. And the important thing as well for Cecil, very much to dunked in the deep end, as it were. He did make himself publicly available to jump into an enduro drive, but perhaps not exactly fully committing to the possibility of that being a thing. And it was only within the last half an hour before the race that the opportunity arose for the 788, or the opportunity arose within the 788 team for Matt to fill in. So, and very much just trying to get himself back in the picture. I mean, he's finally got himself back in the picture for Super 2 pace, but the difference with Super 2 and Supercars, one of the key things perhaps can be for drivers, is that the limitations of the setup window in Dev Series actually makes the car easier to work with, because the cars can only really behave one way outside of bar changes, as opposed to Supercars where it's a complete open book.
But you know what? Good on him for putting his hand up and actually volunteering to help. Whoops! And I've actually just noticed he's had a little bit of a moment there while we were just cutting back to take a look at another battle. He had a moment and slipped off the curb there at turn number 4, and he's managed to stay out of trouble. But yeah, good on him by actually putting his hand up and saying, you know what, if someone has an issue or needs a fill-in, I'm happy to jump aboard, and was picked up by Steve Burko pretty quickly, and that car's not steering. So I think it's got some steering damage. He also lets Peter Thrower go through there, who's a lap ahead. and now just staying wide and letting McNichol through as well. So doing the right thing here and just trying to stay out of the driver's way after probably picking up a little bit of damage. And this is the thing too, number of drivers in the Dev Series not used to no ABS, no traction control in the main game as he comes to the lane, and will have to unfortunately repair probably some of the damage to that car. Probably a pretty badly flat spotted car front tyre as well.
Yeah, I think it really is a flat spot, not a puncture. But yeah, the car was not happy under braking there. Part of the reason was pinching to the left, but he is now to the lane, and he'll get back out again with a fresh set of tyres.
He certainly will. Not quite half distance yet, still a little way to go in this one. Bailey Hall's taken the 00 machine up on the road to 9th place at the moment, and being pressured here by Cam Rutledge, who's still yet to actually take a driver change in that car, the Anson Motorsport 915. But this is now the lap where if you haven't performed a driver swap yet, you could potentially get your driver out in the course of the next handful of laps or so and actually get your A driver in and run to the flag.
Yeah, so for example, talking about the swaps, I just saw a comment from Brute reckoning Cecil had no force feedback, which might explain some of the issues he was having. Burko is now back into that car as well. Yeah,
so there's been another driver swap there aboard the 788, so not a surprise there as well. So they'll get Burko in, he can try and get the car on the road back up as high as he can, and then they will probably put Cecil back in the car for the latter part of the race to get his minimum laps out the way.
But yeah, as you mentioned, from where things sit now, anybody that's been running since the start of the race that has a 40-60 set in mind, so not that they would, but the likes of Kurt Stenberg, Brendan Ross, Cam Rutledge is another one you mentioned, that haven't done a driver swap, Hans Brunswick as well, they're now in the window where they've hit their minimum laps, so they can, if they're going to just do a simple run not half the race, but run a 40, then run a clean 60 at the back end, and no other interchange there, they're in the window now to take their the secondary driver out of the picture. Yeah, they certainly are in that window. So that's the piece of the puzzle too. Like if they were banking on, running and then getting another, a faster driver in at some point, what is the crossover point? So people that are in that window, Brendan Ross is in that window, so too Kurt Stenberg, Lockie Locke, Hans Brunswick is, so too is Cam Rutledge. They're the ones that haven't actually taken a driver swap just yet. And need to really give it a bit more thought here as to how they actually want to slice and dice it. So they'll be putting some pretty fast bodies into some of those cars. And I guess the big one as well, because Igmanis and Devonish are out of this one as well, it almost puts a clean run to the flag for those faster drivers that have worked their way to the front now over the last sort of 50 or so laps. Absolutely, yeah, just keep an eye on the live chat. Matt did confirm he was having force feedback dramas. We've got Zfade, who I know that's one of the guys from SES, but I can't remember who that is precisely.
It's Reese McGillivray.
It is Reese McGillivray. I thought it was the case. So Reese reckoning that Cupid might be on hard tyres. He reckons he spotted some white wall somewhere and all that. Which, if that is the case, and you'll be able to confirm that, I obviously don't have what's needed at mine to see it. But if that's the case, that would be a smart move. If Cupid's going to be in for the long haul, get him into a tyre that will support him running for the long haul. And it's not the quick tyre, but the hard tyre is the more stable tyre because the drop-off is a lot less severe than it is for the soft. Yeah,
well, from where I'm sitting at, it does exactly look like, we're watching Ryan Smith on the screen at the moment, it does exactly look like it is a white sidewall tyre on that car. Having actually taken the camera and zoomed in a little bit nicer this time, I can actually see that it does look like that. But it is a little bit difficult to grab them when they are going at full speed. I think we actually need maybe a slightly different, like a little nodule or something on the car that actually tells us what tyre it actually is, as Smith has just made a little mistake at turn number 12 there, and he's running in 10th place at the moment.
I think we have previously talked about the idea of having something similar to the co-driver light, but setting that up for hard tyres, but the simple fact is the functionality doesn't quite exist the way we'd like it to within the AMS architecture. Yeah, it's a little bit difficult to spot sometimes, so maybe look, there might be an evidence of that. Usually the dead giveaway has always been whichever car is producing the quicker lap times is typically the one that's on the tyre. There's usually about a 1.5 to 2 second time delta difference between the hard and the soft. There is. It's a hard one to tell over an enduro with putting A versus B drivers in, you know, full boat versus, you know, half tank and that sort of stuff. But you can get a general idea if somebody who's normally pulling away isn't pulling away, is getting called. There's a fair assumption that they're either on the hard tyre, or if there's somebody from the top end of the field, they're looking at a safety car. We have a safety car.
Yeah, so something's gone on here, looking around the track to see if there is a reason for why the safety car is out. And I can't see anything immediately unless there's been a spin or something's happened. But what that will do is it will trigger a flurry of stops, I'd imagine. And some of these drivers that are in this window to change over potentially are about to do so. So looking at the likes of Stenberg and Ross. So Stenberg in, is he? Ross is definitely
Stenberg is in.
Stenberg's
Ross is in. Warwick in. Lognan in. Ryan Smith was the first one to come across the pit lane entrance with the safety car being called, and he took the opportunity straight away. I don't think there's going to be a driver swap there. I see the 074 in. I see the Lockie Lock 237 in.
Cupid in as well.
Cupid in. Burko's going around. I think most of the guys are going to take an oil machine, even if it's not going to be a driver swap, to pick up fuel and tyres here. Yeah,
I think that the issue here is going to be if you were in a position to swap drivers, now is the opportunity to do so. But the real question is, in the case of, as is looking at the pit lane here, it's a very busy place right now. There's cars arriving, cars departing. If you're in a position to do your swap and get it over and done with, you can. For some drivers, that's going to be critical. For the likes of Stenberg and Zach Brown, Stenberg potentially is done for the day. He potentially could leave that car in the hands of Brown all day, but it's now in a spot where it's in the hands of what I guess we would say is the B driver. Mackenzie's actually trying to get out of the lane here. He can't get out because the Higginson and Hall car was in the way. So
yeah, and we're seeing a couple of interferences, such as seeing a couple of issues here. We saw it just before as well between the two PBF cars. The lapped car, the secondary car of Steve Warwick came into the pit lane before Phil Boak, so Phil Boak was actually trapped. And he's actually lost a position and all that to what is now Noah Turra, who stepped behind the wheel of the 237.
And that's an interesting move too, because Locke doesn't have to turn another lap for the day, and Turra is in the hands of the amped up racing CRE team in the main game. Turra is definitely the quicker of the two, so they've now got their quick driver aboard, and he can run to the flag here. So he'll be able to hold that up to the likes of Zach Brown and the drivers that have swapped and gone ahead here. With Zach Brown has indeed taken over from Kurt Stenberg. So at this restart here, there's going to be a little bit of a reshuffling of some of this order. I think there'll be a few drivers that will definitely drop a bit further back through the order, and some that will come forward.
Yeah, so to give you an idea of who's going to be in the cars for this restart, Zach Brown now aboard the 244. Luke Rosella has jumped aboard the 888. That could be till the end of the race. Noah Turra on board the 237, the same picture there. Phil Boak still on board the 074. Dane McKenzie back on board the 119. Pete Thrower stays on board the 43. Cam Rutledge is still running around in the 915, probably going for a half-half split at this point, I think, with Cox there. Similar pace, Cox maybe a little bit quicker, but maybe not quite feeling as confident. We've got, that it'll be Bailey Hall in the 00. Stuart McNichols still on board the 125. Lewis Wedding now, that's the other one we're looking out for. Lewis Wedding is now on board the 88, so that'll probably be till the end of the race as well. Anthony Green's back on board the amped up racing number 10. Kai Jones is now on board the 66. And Steve Warwick on board the 45, and Callahan and Burko are a lap down, but we'll be probably getting that lap back on board the 06 and the 788.
Yep, and there's a few drivers that were just given the wave around as well that were trapped between the race leader and the safety car, which is customary. They are given the permission to go through. And there are a few drivers that are just definitely getting into the sequence now that will have to be given the green flag to go around and pass the safety car. So you said Darryl Callahan and Steve Burko, they're going to get their laps back here. Now Burko actually needed 2 laps because he had gone 2 laps down by with Cecil being off the road. So he got one of them back and went around before the safety car came out while the leaders were in the lane. So he got one back already, so that was quite smart for him. And he's actually in this sequence now as well. So he'll be able to get past and be given his lap back as they probably go up the back straight, I'd imagine.
Yeah, one of the things that we do need before we can execute any wave around is we need the safety car train pretty much set up, more or less ready to go. just to make things expedite things. And at least in this case, the two cars we're worrying about, Callahan is sitting 6th on the road. He's between Mackenzie and Thrower, and Burko is back behind Cameron Rutledge. So they are in position, ready to go. So if we were to wave them around out of turn 4, they'll be able to get a good run up towards turn 6 and at least get a good head of steam back towards getting their lap back.
Yeah, there they are. So we're just waiting to see if there's a little bit of change in the order here. Just waiting to see if some of these cars can make their way through. Burko and Callahan are the ones that have just been given the green flag to go past. And here they come, I think. So they're just trying to weave their way through. There goes Callahan. Burko goes the other way. Bit of a difficult situation, and the hard part here too is that drivers were warned that it was going to be displayed in the race channel in the chat that drivers would be given the opportunity to get their lap back with the field closed up, and that drivers were, as the safety car checks up at turn 4, and that drivers would be punished if they made the process overly difficult. And I could see there they were actually spread out a bit like Brown's cows heading up the back straight. A few people probably weren't quite aware of where those cars were.
Yeah, what's helped out as well as safety car is going to go around another lap as things sit right now, which will make things a little easier for those trying to get their lap back. They will be able to get back to the back of the train, if not pretty close to it. And as for those that are pitted, so I think Lewis Wedding has been into the lane again. Wouldn't surprise me, as I said, Pixel guys thinking big strategies, definitely trying to wave into into an opportunity to put fresher tyres on, put an extra lap of fuel in, very much trying to pad out the next stint for the 88. And yeah, we should be getting back underway at the end of this lap.
Yeah, looking like it's about a 3 or 4 lap caution at the moment, as just keeping an eye on how those two drivers are going, getting back to the head to the back of the train. So hopefully it won't be too far away. We see those drivers that did take the wave around, get back onto the back of the queue, and they're not too far away from doing so. Actually, the field's actually just going through turn 4 at the moment, so they'll probably catch up to the back of the pack, I'd say, by about Dandenong Road, Penrite Bridge, which is when we sort of expect that the race leader will have to grab control of this field.
Yeah, so an interesting one, the way this plays out. You tend to, by no means is there like the default people you lean to for a restart in a safety car, but you tend to have the people that end up in that position. I don't think Zach Brown's led too many restarts in his Supercars career.
No, I don't think so at all.
So by all means, he will have the combined wealth of the Pixel team in there instructing him how to do it properly. He is starting already now to check the field up. So I believe by the gap that's being led to the left of the safety car already, I would think the safety car is planning on coming in this lap. A little bit of a gap being set up, and I think we're probably not too far off now.
Well, this is the point in the driver's briefing notes where they needed to start checking the field up and allowing the safety car to escape to pit lane, and I can see Brown's got control of the field right now. So we are gearing up for going back to green here at the end of lap 60. So several drivers have completed their minimums. What do they do from here? In the case of the race leader, what do you do? Because you've got your slower driver in the car now, and does he run to the end of the race? Let's soon find out as we go back to green at the commencement of lap 61 with everybody back on the lead lap. Oh, what happened there?
It's the field. I'm not sure if they weren't given a yellow or green, what that was, but yeah, the train went nowhere. So
yeah, the train went absolutely nowhere.
At a monument, at a dive from wherever he was in the train, but either Brown was massively asleep at the wheel or something wasn't flagged the way it was supposed to be flagged.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's happened there. So something's gone wrong. Tara got the jump on all of them, and I think one of the other guys that's in the chat at the moment is probably going to have a bit of a look and see what happened there. But that was a most unusual situation where the race leader didn't sort of quite go, and I'm a bit as perplexed as you are here, Rody, because Tara's gone, and I was sort of expecting that to happen. Right, I just saw on the screen there with Brown letting the faster Rosella go through. There's been a monumental change in some of the order here, and I really don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, I've just looking at the back of the field. Actually, and all that as well. We've actually lost Cam Rutledge out of this race as well, with the congestion that was happening at turn 1 with like cars 4 or 5 wide. He's made contact with somebody, or had some assistance actually from Higginson into the inside wall of turn 1. which I think it hasn't I don't think it's popped the engine, but it's definitely done some thermal damage to the car, and Rutledge is out of this race.
Well, it looks like the verdict coming through is that the game didn't actually go to green, but this is the hard part of the equation too. You've got drivers that are being told that they have to start backing the pack up at a certain point, but then the control line actually comes up fairly quickly, because in race trim, there's a little bit of argy-bargy going on here. In race trim, what happens is the control line is actually at the pits, near to the pit exit. It's not down where the cars actually grid up, so drivers have got to be aware of that. But I'm not sure if they were a little bit too fast or what was going on, but that rule about where the pack need started being backed up by was brought in after Townsville because of what happened where a few things weren't shown the green flag.
Yeah, something else I need to probably patch into quickly and fix is I've just noticed that Burko has been thrown a lap down, which would probably be a penalty that was handed out to him by virtue of passing the safety car, which was obviously instructed to him to do, but obviously the penalty for a lap being deducted isn't one that we can automatically clear as such, so I'm going to tap in quickly and fix that one up.
That's allowed to be a lap adjustment that needs to happen there as well, because he definitely did get his lap back by virtue of being instructed to pass the safety car. So there goes Mackenzie. He's now gone around the outside of Zach Brown, and this is what we expected. Expected Brown to start to drop a handful of spots here as the race wore on, given he's only just gone into the car and some of the faster pilots are now aboard their respective machines. So after all of that, the restart will probably be looked at a little bit, but I don't think there's too much that will actually change hands after all of that. Bit hard to sort of go back and try and expect another restart to occur at that point, as Brown now coming under some increasing pressure from Phil Boak, and then Noah Tara with the lead of the race. The margin with Luke Rosella behind him has started to evaporate quite quickly, and well, this might end up being a little bit of a no contest sooner rather than later, as we see what the flying laps are going to be as they come across the line this time. 8-2 for Tara, 7-5 for Rosella, and another little pinch break going into turn number 1 for Tara. He did something similar last night at the start of the second grid race. It unfortunately sent him off the road, but he is the only hope at the moment for CRE Engineering Stable to actually get some points in the Teams Championship, because right now there's a massive points shift, Rhodey, that is going the opposite way in terms of the teams. But the flip side that I think the sister car needs to look at here in the likes of Egmanis and Devonish is that they can count this toward their drop round, because they've raced the whole entire season so far, and they're coming out of this with 0 points. So this effectively for them means they'll drop 0 points as their drop round for this event. Yes, granted, they won't get the crown of being the Sandown 400 champions, as Rosella goes deep into turn number 11 and comes out the other side with the race lead. But for the likes of those that are pursuing them in the championship, that have contested every round and finished every round so far and scored points, they will actually drop points toward the championship. And for the man that just took over the race lead, Luke Rosella, he's only done half the championship, so unfortunately for him, he can't drop a 0 points finish unless it's in this back half of the championship if he doesn't contest a race, because he was brought in as a substitute. So anything prior to round 6 for him does not count as a drop round. It's not available for him.
Absolutely, yeah. So, yeah. As you mentioned, the big picture thing is for the team's points, and where that drop round will come in as well. Oh no. I've just watched Noah Tara disappear from the track. Yeah,
I've just seen it happen as well, and I'm wondering if there's been some sort of a disconnection there as well. So the sister car might be out of it, and as he's dropping down the timing screens, and we could have both CRE Mustangs out of the equation, and we do. So that is a very, very difficult pill to swallow for Sandown, for that team.
Yeah, I didn't expect to see that one.
No.
Yeah, that's a shame, because Lockie Lock had done what he needed to. He set himself up in a good position. Apparently, it wasn't just a disconnect. I think Noah's net itself just bounced. So
yep,
that's a shame.
That is a massive shame. And on top of that, Locke had done the minimum laps required as well, so they were good till the end as well. So that's an unfortunate set of circumstances for them. and basically, I dare say, gives Rosella pretty much a clean run to the finish. Wow.
I will say, yeah, I've just come back while we're looking at Tara's car in the pit line. I've just noticed as well, Callahan's car has been sitting there for a long time, so I wouldn't be surprised there's an issue in the swap there between Callahan and McDonald.
And that's strange too, because they're in the lane, but they swapped not all that long ago and came in under the safety car. So I don't see any reason why they needed to actually stop again unless they had some damage from the incident at the restart.
The only other thing I might throw around is perhaps Damon wasn't available, and I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I've done this myself. Granted, I do a lot of single driver enduros, but occasionally you need to take a break. You need to go and you need to go and visit the restroom. So that might be what we're seeing for Callahan. I wouldn't be entirely surprised.
Yeah, potentially. That car's still in the lane at the moment. Still one lap down. Well, the order's shaken up now. So Rosella to the head of the field, Mackenzie in second place, Boak in third, and then Zach Brown in fourth, and then the next car in the queue is Lewis Wedding in fifth place, who's taken over from Hans Brunswick. Now, they are actually good to the end as well, because Brunswick did the lion's share of the driving in the early stints. So I dare say cars 88 and 888 will not do a further driver change in this race. The car on screen definitely needs to do another swap in Boak and Foley. They've got to get Boak's laps out the way. So too the car be ahead of them in Mackenzie and Cupid. They definitely have to stop again. Just by looking at the math, Cupid's only done about 33 laps or so. So he's only got to do one more stint. So
yeah,
that's not a bad problem to have if you're them.
Yeah, no, I was just looking at the order of things, and I was thinking back to what we said earlier about the 119, the 125 battle, and I was wondering, hang on, where's Stuart McNichol gone? And he's to the back of the train currently. I'm not sure whether that was as a result of the restart or perhaps something in the pit stop. I think they are under their own solo pit boom, so I don't think they would have had an issue the way the main PBF cars did. But yeah, that throws a bit of a curveball for them as well, with Mackenzie up the front of the field and McNichol towing around at the back of it.
Yeah. Well, just noticing as well, Callahan's got going again as well, so it looks like there might have been a damage repair. Will Devnish in the chat is allowing us the information that they were hit at turn 1, so
okay, possibly,
that explains that.
Yeah, you can potentially get some quite big damage numbers built up if you've had a monumental. To be fair, the only way you tend to do that with a supercar, they tend to be fragile in the important bits. So if you get that much damage, it's only you've got unrepairable. You've hit terminal with either engines or wheels off. But yeah, he seems to have gotten lucky there. In one aspect, the damage was at least repairable. So he's back out there with essentially a new car. But yeah, at the moment he's under blue flags from Luke Rosell, about to go a second lap down as a result of that pit stop.
Yeah, so that's unsurprising there as well, that he's going to go a lap down and a further lap down as a result of that. And look, that's a bit of baptism of fire for them, hasn't it? The Callahan had a pretty interesting debut at Townsville. He was given the gong to go up. Actually had been driving fairly well. Actually had an outright win to his name in the main game coming up at Barbagallo earlier on in the year. Just by virtue of the fact a couple of drivers came together and he was in prime position to capitalise on it. It hasn't been all smooth sailing since then, but his driving and his racecraft have been okay. Townsville sort of was a little bit of a wake-up call, and between the two of them, they're used to iRacing. That's the important part. They're used to running around in iRacing, and it's a different beast playing here in AMS. As you can see there, he has now gone a second lap down. But importantly for them, still circulating and still picking up some points and still competing.
Yeah, just having a look at the live chat. Brendan Ross chiming in with a mid-race update from the Pixel crew. They're pretty happy with where they're sitting. Lewis is having a little bit of trouble with getting the feel out of the car. Perhaps just a bit of a relative lack of seat time the last few months, not being in a main game drive, or just not quite getting the car to behave the way he wants it to today. But that said, he's still running pretty well up there in fifth. And yeah, the focus is listed. Zach's keeping in touch with PBF, which seems to be the idea that he's keeping up with Boki. So Boki's having a good turn of speed himself then, considering how strong we saw from Zach in the race for the grid, and perhaps where at least where I internally expected Boki to be running. I didn't expect the matchup to be that close between the pair of them. So Boki's having a good run as well. And then yeah, Luke obviously very much checking out at the front. He's got like a 9-second lead at this point.
Yeah, he does. So the real interesting part is just this little battle group here for second, third and fourth. So Mackenzie followed by Boak, followed by Brown. And you know, looking at the lap times here as well, like Rosella's into the 7s, and he's consistently into the 7s at the moment. And then these guys are all in the 8s, and they're not doing too, you know, there's not a lot of difference between the two of them. So this is now, I think, from a point of Mackenzie getting to the next point where he can hand over to Cupid and get those minimum laps out of the way for him, and then jump back in the car for the run to the flag. So that's the bit that they're working towards. For Boak and for Foley, they're in a similar spot. So Foley had completed the first 44 laps by my math of this race, so he's got to get back in for another stint. And Boak has got to get to the minimum 52 somewhere along the line as well. So wondering whether they're going to bank on maybe a late interference from the safety car where they can get Foley in the car and then have him run to the flag.
Yeah, just seeing a pit stop at the back for Steve Burke. I'm not sure whether it'll be driver swap for Matt Cecil, maybe to get him back in the car again, because they're another team that I have to worry about the minimum lap count.
Yeah, they do.
But yeah, a couple of drivers at the back still battling on. Just sort of a little squabble between Bailey Hall and Stuart Nickel all over the position of 10th.
Yeah, so they're still fighting it out here as well. Now, the bit for me, Rhodey, that I want to take a look at here is when did Leonard Grossel get out of that car? Because he's obviously got to get back in at some point. And I'm just looking to see, unfortunately AMS doesn't really give us a good indication when you're looking at who's in the car about when those pit stops actually happened. But just looking at my math, it looks like it might have been somewhere around lap 56 potentially was the last time that car potentially was in the lane, which might have been under the safety car condition because they would have come in and done that swap. The only other time after that it would have been up around about lap 39. So I'm tending to suggest that maybe that change happened earlier rather than later.
Yeah, I think it was 39 because I remember we did pick up McNichol in the car earlier before the safety car. So yeah, I think McNichol's been in since at least around 39. So he's going to be working on, what is that, coming into his late 30s of laps.
He's completed about 30. If he came in at lap 39, so he's in the early 30s in terms of his driver stint at the moment. So you've got to look at that and say, okay, where do we need to get this opportunity to get the driver back into this car? So 39 plus 50. You know, you get to 89, so you need to get into the early 90s for them from a lap point of view. If they just want to run McNichol in, then put Grossel in and finish the lap and finish the race out as quickly as they can. And I mean, the same can be said for the driver behind as well, Bailey Hall, because he's been in the car since lap 38, so not that much earlier than the car ahead. So these two are actually on a similar strategy in terms of drivers and how far they actually want to go in this one. So they're both going to be looking for another stop, probably I'd say, we went back to green flag running at about lap 60, so they can probably realistically run to about lap 80 and then stop again, and then maybe a short sprint to get the driver in for lap 90. But realistically, I would be saying push on as much as you can. Whoop, as Bailey Hall actually pulls the trigger. I was actually being saying you want to probably push on well beyond 90 and get into the early 100s, because that means you only would have to stop one more time. If you stop in the 90s, you end up having to do another stop in the sequence to get your driver in and get another change done. I just saw a local yellow flag down at turn number 9, and it's for Callahan. He's just becoming some lap traffic here to the leaders that are 2nd, 3rd and 4th on the road.
Yeah, the other factor I was thinking about with the terms of where you want to stop relative to drivers is also, I think we saw a lot of the cars in the pit lane, but I don't think we saw every single car coming to the pit lane at a safety car, which I can see why you might not. If you've recently been in the lane, like Cecil and Burko had just been in the lane, and it depends on where they're thinking. If they're solely focused on trying to hit driver minimums, they're not really worried about, bigger picture stuff, and that's fine. But yeah, I don't think we saw every car in the lane, and perhaps strategy call as well. There were some drivers that were double boomed, like the 45 and the 074. And we mentioned that one earlier. The 88 and 888 also double boomed as well, but they managed to orchestrate that one pretty well. And the two amped up racing by CRE cars, who at this point are actually the lead CRE cars. Well, sorry, there's Mackenzie as well, but they are actually now sort of by default of the way things have worked out, they're actually the remaining two CRE cars in this race. Yeah, it was interesting how that's all kind of played out. But yeah, that was also a strategy play for some of them, which I think was why we saw Hall in that lap when we did.
Yeah, I think so. And there's a couple of other drivers who are going to need to stop here as well. So these two on screen definitely need to make another driver change at some point. Kai Jones in the 66 and Steve Warwick in the 45. They've definitely got to hand back over to the other two drivers in Ryan Smith and Luke Speck respectively, and trying to work out the numbers on those at the moment is the other matter, because Smith started the car, handed over to Jones. He did another stint before the safety car as well and then handed back. So they've gone for a bit of a different split strategy, whereas Speck did sort of like the first good chunk of the race, but I think they actually had swapped out before the safety car came into play. So there's definitely another stint in there for Luke Speck at some point.
Yeah, I did see Steve with his head in the car about sort of that 39 margin. So about the end of that second stint where a lot of guys were pitting is, I'm pretty sure, the time that I spotted Warwick in the car as well. So I think a lot of drivers that we're not fresh on seeing are those that pitted around the 30 odd mark. So they're all in a similar window if they're aiming to be the B driver, as it were.
There you go, some onboard action for Steve Warwick heading down into turn number 6. The blind approach to the crest of the hill as well, going up the back straight into turn number 6. He gets nice and close to the rear wing here of the Kai Jones machine, but then just a little bit of good traction out of turn number 9 for Jones as we look rearward, and he manages to hold off. But Warwick's definitely got some good mid-corner pace at the moment. He's just losing out in the traction zones. Look at that there. He goes into the pits that lap, so he's actually in and looking like he's going to change over at least a set of tyres and put some more fuel in, but the next question is whether or not he puts Speck back in the car.
Absolutely, yeah. So they're in the window for it, and I think with where Speck and Warwick are at, Warwick's definitely had more of the seat time with the car, but there's perhaps a bit of a base core feeling that Warwick, by no means is he an unequal part of the team, but he wasn't one of the registered drivers for the car. He's been a fill-in, to be fair. He's ended up doing more laps, I think, in the Enduro Cup than Brab will by virtue of Brab's schedule. But yeah, it's interesting how the dynamic will play and where the split will come. I imagine they're going to probably lean a bit more towards a 50-50 being of similar pace. And actually, talking on that, Steve Warwick has stayed in the car, so he'll be doing another stint.
Yeah, there he is. He's going to come out in 10th place just as these guys are starting to watching the screen and coming around onto the front straight. So, in actual fact, for Warwick, he's going to come out between the race leader and Mackenzie, who's in second place. So there'll be blue flags in order here for Warwick. He'll have to let these faster guys through. Oh, bit of a pinch break there for Mackenzie heading into the braking zone behind them as well.
Yeah, I was just talking. Yeah, just thinking through the interchange of pit setup is Mackenzie out there, but just seen that Zach Brown dived into the lane recently as well, so
and
he'll
Jones.
he'll be in, I imagine, for the bulk of the rest of the drive. I'm not sure if he's going to necessarily be a 40-60 split, but that safety car came at a pretty good time to get Stenberg out of the car, so they might keep things as they sit. But yeah, Brown and Jones both in the pit lane as things sit. Will probably just be topping off fuel and or tyres.
Yeah, Brown staying in the car and off he goes, and that's precisely what I expected to see, because he's got to get a good chunk of laps out of the way. He's only done the better part of about 20 laps of the 52 minimum required, and he comes out into some clear air in 8th place. And he started to lose a little bit of touch to the back of Phil Boak, and Lewis Wedding was starting to make some headway, starting to get a feel for that car finally again and move his way through the field. So Brown into 8th place. And Jones actually comes out in what is 10th place on the road.
I would say, I think for those that are on a similar strategy, we're falling into a pit window because we've just seen Mackenzie, Green and Thrower all come into the lane.
Yeah, they have. And there was another yellow flag down here at turn number 9 going around, and I'm wondering if that's one of the other cars that potentially has been off the road there. As I'm watching McNichol, and there might have been another car that went around. Actually, it was Darryl Callahan. They're out of this race now finally, so it looks like their car's finally given up the ghost.
Yeah, I just went back and called that on the replay. They were buried down at turn 7, so possibly lost the rear. Yeah, just a slow rotation, it looks like, and then clattered off the wall into the tyre barrier. So similar line to what we saw from the famous 86 crash from a few years ago. Granted, he didn't go flipping over the fence into a back of a pickup truck. But
Now Cupid's actually gotten back in the car. This is important for their strategy, because Cupid had only completed the laps up until Mackenzie got back in the car at the pit stop sequence. So he handed that back over at about lap 55 or 56 roughly, and Mackenzie's done another 20 or so laps since then, and now at the beginning of lap 178, Cupid's back in. So this will then take him up to his minimum requirement. And just doing the rough math here, he's only got about 18 laps that he needs to do, so it's a full stint. So importantly for them, they've now got Zach Brown on their tail. And this will be an interesting little battle over the next handful of laps, because Brown's just been in the lane. He's got 1 lap warmer tyres than Mackenzie. Sorry, Mackenzie, than Cupid. And he'll be pushing on here because he needs to make this advantage count. This is Supercars' main game driver behind a Development Series Super 2 driver. And, well, Hayden had all the right answers to all the questions that Ross threw at him earlier on in the piece, but how does it pan out this time around, as we can see the 88 machine of Wedding and Brunswick leaving the lane as well?
Yeah, I think the fair point to play, I'm just going to double check the results from yesterday, but I'm pretty sure it was the case that, yeah, Cupid finished third to what on the track into the last couple of laps, or he actually was fourth, compared to Brown's first, and Brown did disappear at the front of the field. But, you know, Cupid was keeping track with Egmanus yesterday, was keeping track with, who was it who ended up winning, keeping track with, I said Egmanus, who was second. I think it was Locke in that car. But he was keeping track with those drivers at that sort of pace. He wasn't losing too much from them. We saw, obviously, in the first couple of stints, while he's keeping up with them, by all means, Kurt Stenberg has the measure over Cupid. I don't think it's as clear-cut between him and Brown, though.
No, I don't think so either. As Brown's starting to apply the pressure here now that the tyres are up to temp, tyres are in the zone, and you can see here Brown just asking questions, sending a few little telegraph messages to the rear bumper of the 119 ahead as they come through that final sequence of corners. Sitting in the draft, closing, still closing, and no opportunity here, so not quite close enough. The draft is powerful here at Sandown, but it's in a touring car like this, you really need to make it work. You really need to have a good run off those couple of corners, like right here. You need to get your run right off this corner here and not lose too much ground, otherwise it means nothing. You can see here, look, you can see the car just starting to drive away off the traction zone at the top of the hill. You need to be able to get to the throttle quicker. Then the draft starts to come into play right here, but then by the time you get in the braking zone, you're not close enough to have a go.
Yeah, half of the art is, and I think we talked about it yesterday as well, is half of the art of Sandown is doing which curves to touch and which curves to avoid. Case in point, through the corner they just ran through, the curb to the left of the preceding corner, the left-hander coming down the hill, you really don't want to touch because that will lob you up in the air and induce front locking. But sort of through this section, for example, you touch a lot of that right-hand curb and not too much of the left-hand curb, but you want to be up and over that exit curb because it gives you a good run. But that exit curb is painted, so it is a bit more slippery, so you can't get to full throttle as quickly. At the same time, you want to hack the right-hander through there, but you can't hack it too harsh, because even though you get away with it in the State Series, we've seen, you know, Formula V's tripod through there. The track limits are a bit stricter than at least the State Series guys seem to get away with through there. And it's a very easy place that you think, oh yeah, I'll just hack this corner, get some good speed out of it. Very easy place to put the track up. Yeah,
absolutely. You can see there as well, I'm just noticing that where Cupid avoided the curb on the inside at turn 4, Brown went up and over it. So that means the car wheels on the left-hand side are in the air, which means it delays getting on throttle because you need all 4 wheels back on the deck. You need both rear wheels to be planted before you can apply the throttle. So that's hurting him off of that corner exit at turn 4. Whereas at turn number 12, you know, you're using all the exit strip. So a bit of a different school of thought here. So just watch this again. Going down here into the chicane, so use the inside curb here, but then they both don't use the curb at turn number 12, but that time Cupid had a poor run. He missed the apex by a good couple of feet, and Brown had a much better run off the corner. And now he's in a position to have a little bit of a look, but just decides against it. He's just dancing around there thinking about it. And both use a little bit of curb here. Now watch the difference in the 2 cars going, actually these 3 cars, going through this sequence here. So you ride the curb on the right there, you ride the curb on the left there, and now watch them down through the corner here. They both clip a little bit of the curb this time around, and Bailey Hall now has to concede and get them out the way. But that turn 4 curb can be a little bit nasty if you don't get it right, and it can delay you getting on throttle heading up the straight. And you need it here because you've got this big rise in the road that you need the power to get up the hill.
Absolutely. There's 2 schools of thoughts on how to take turn 4. And I wouldn't say either is necessarily incorrect. It depends on how the car's set up for the driving style. You either avoid that curb entirely to get a smooth run out of the corner and take a lot of the exit curb, or you take a little bit less exit curb and you hack the inside curb and try and use it to loft the car up and pivot the car mid-corner to get that turn done and straighten up the exit. But you've then got the issue of waiting for the car to come back down.
Got a little bit of a drama. The 125 machine of Stuart McNichol is going very, very slowly at the moment. And I'm not sure if they're pulling over to retire. Looks like they are. They're out of business. So something has happened there with the McNichol machine. And is that might be an engine failure, I think. Let's have a look. It's seeing here, and they were going awfully slowly coming into the chicane. That looks all normal at this point. And yeah, I think they might have actually something might have expired.
It looks like a double downshift through one very quickly from 6th to 4th, and it looks like a popped engine, which is a shame because they were running very well there. Yeah, very, very strong running. Stuart maybe not quite on pace, but the important thing for Stuart, he was getting some consistency under his belt, and they were in a good position to swap that over to Leonard Grosser later in the race. And it's a shame because the biggest thing that I would have thought would have been their issue was the net, but they've held up pretty well for that as well. So
they've done really well up to that point. That was really sad.
That's going to sting, but they're in a good spot now. They know where they're at coming into Bathurst next month. So you know they've got the pace, they've got the ability to run. They're just it's just those little things that creep in at the back end of a stint.
Yeah, they are. So that's important for them. There's a little battle starting to unfold here in the last few laps. Wedding has slowly been closing the margin down to Phil Boken. This is now going to be a right royal slugfest for position number 2 on the rostrum. And keeping in mind that Boken's still got a hand back to Foley at some point, but Wedding is good till the end. And then the other cars that we've been seeing, Brown technically is good to the end in 5th, and Cupid's got a hand back over to Mackenzie at some point. Or not that we expect him to hand over at some point actually as well, because Mackenzie hasn't quite completed the full lap allocation, but neither has Cupid.
Yeah, they're I think very much sort of wobbling it down towards the end, just sort of dropping in and out a driver where it feels relevant. The other battle we've kind of got kicking on track at the moment is actually a little bit of a 3-car train squabble over 7th. We got Darren Loughnane starting his own little train of 3 with Kai Jones and Peter Thrower, and it's interesting the way everything's fallen out, because Thrower probably the quickest and definitely the more seasoned of the 3 in the train, but Kai Jones, a bit more of the youthful speed. I mean, he's popped in and out. We've not seen too much of him, and Loughnane we've seen plenty of, previous year Super 3 champion, and definitely him and Jesse's trying to have a crack at the Super 2 team title this year. But interesting how that's played out, that, you perhaps think, oh yeah, Thrower would be through pretty quickly, but no, it's interesting just to have a little battle dynamics playing out across the 3 cars.
Yeah, definitely a little interesting dynamic, and to think as well that Loughnane's actually a super sub for this round as well, with Aidan Williams away on karting duties. I think it's the same for Lockie Burke, which is why Lewis Wedding's in the Burke and Brunswick machine this weekend. Only to think what might have happened, because Aidan Williams is definitely no slouch. He's got a couple of wins in Super 2 under his belt this year and has driven very, very well aboard the Warped Race Engines Commodore. But he would definitely have added a different dynamic with Anthony Green aboard this car, and they potentially could be up there challenging for a podium spot. But with no prior running apart from last year in the main game, Darren Loughnane, hats off to you, driving very, very well.
Yeah, he is. He's setting himself up really well, and you're right. It'll be interesting to see for this car when Aidan Williams does able to step in. We haven't seen a lot of him in Dev Series, but when we have seen him in Dev Series, he's been pretty quick. So that car will probably elevate itself a little bit above where it's at. But the way this race is going, and I said this to the 3 PBF teams before we started, that look, just get to the finish. That's the easiest way to score points here, is get to the finish. Unfortunately, it hasn't quite worked out for the 125 as things have rolled out. But that's half the focus for these guys. And like, Darren's going to score good points filling in for the 10 just by virtue of his out there putting in the laps, getting good running. He doesn't necessarily need to be the fastest, but at the same time, he's putting up a good fight where he needs to.
He certainly is putting up a really good fight. And Jones on board here hasn't really got anything for him at the moment. But this is what you were talking about. This is part of the reason why I think Thrower's prepared to sit there at the moment. He's not going to do anything silly, because with Devonish and Igmanis both out, and with Locke and Tara both out, those 2 team cars are not scoring any points, because the drop rounds are still yet to be calculated. They're not going to be calculated till the end of the season. This means that they can put some points on the board for the moment and bring themselves a bit further into contention, because that's what Ross and Rosella are doing. It's what Wedding and Brunswick are doing, and it's what Foley and Boak are doing right now, is moving themselves up the championship order at the expense of those that have not completed this race.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's the thing as well, is very much, if nothing else, by virtue of being out there getting some running in. And like a good example right now is where Bailey Hall's sitting. He's sitting last on the road, and I think he's currently a lap down, and he's sitting behind Cecil by 20-30 seconds. But him and Higo are going to get points for 11th, which is the most points they've gotten, I think. I think Hall was threatened top 10s before. And Higo's been around there at the start of races, but I think there's still going to be one of the bigger points hauls for a round, just by virtue of sticking with it.
Yep. Race leader putting the Matt Cecil and Steve Burko car down a lap there as well at turn number 1. So Cecil back in, trying to complete his minimums here. So they'll be on for some points at least by virtue of completing the minimum distance and getting to the checkered flag, which is handy to see. So Rosella's got a massive margin at the moment. It's borderline ridiculous as to what the margin is right now with all the big names out. But it definitely is. It's pretty much a one-horse show at the moment. But this has started to get a little bit closer over the last couple of laps now as well. Wedding is right on the rear boot lid of Phil Boak, and sliding the car on exit. Actually, that's not going to do wonders for your straightaway speed heading up the back straight.
Yeah, this is probably dipping for these guys into strong 2019-2020 vibes. 2019 was Boak finishing second to Foley in the Drivers' Championship, and obviously PBF taking the team's title. But Wedding was there or thereabouts. I think at the back of the time he was running in one of the, I think he was filling in actually at times in the Scuderia Alitalia Ford in 2019, but he did step up and ran Loose Sim Sport in 2020 and had the HDS cars that he popped in and out of as well. But yeah, not easy. It definitely was worked hard for, but in the end, pretty clean move there for Lewis Wedding to get past Phil Boak, but Boakey's not going to give that up.
No, it's not over yet, and keeping an eye on their lap times as well. They've been doing 1-minute 10s over the course of the last couple of laps. Cupid behind is actually doing 9s. He's a full second a lap quicker than these two at the moment. So this fight that's continued to go on as Boak went the long way round at 1. He now has the high ground for 2. Wedding's got the high ground for 3, and he'll have the next one at 4 as well. But the longer this goes on, this is now starting to play hands, or into the hands of Cupid and Mackenzie, because they're going to pounce at the stops.
Yeah, this is going to help them out potentially in the longer run. But yeah, like Boat, I would audibly gasp there at him trying to go on the outside at turn 1 because it almost worked. It's not a passing opportunity around the outside at 1, but nobody told Boakey that.
And it's too wide here.
Yep, that was about how it's to go. It's really hard to get a proper racing move on too wide through there, and Boakey did his best. He held up valiantly, but he did leave Lewis the inside there.
Yeah, he had no choice there. I think he had to give him some room on the inside, and that's the hard part because A, it's a blind approach to 6. B, it's bumpy. C, your braking has got to be absolutely spot on, as Wedding was taking a bit of some liberties with the limits there.
Very much trying to break the toe, I think.
Yeah, very much trying to break, actually shortest path around the corner, I think, more importantly,
that
is what
well,
that was.
yeah.
He got very close to the pit, to the fence there. I think I remember Matt Cecil in a development series race getting very, very close to that barrier, in actual fact clouting that barrier, I think, and then spilling back onto the track in front of other cars. I think it might have been a year or two ago.
Yeah, sounds about right. We're going probably back to the last year of Super 2, but yeah, I do remember that happening.
So Wedding finally through after all of that, Boak into third. Now we get to see whether or not that's actually going to pay dividends for the two behind, because Brown's doing his best actually to hang on to Cupid here as well, coming into what would probably be at least another 2 stops left in this race. Real question is, where does it fall? Because there's 129 laps is the race. We're now working lap 90 for some of these. For the race leader, it's 91. And, well, race leaders don't have to stop again. Wedding doesn't have to stop again. Boak, or change drivers again, rather. Boak does. Mackenzie and Cupid have to exchange again. Brown's good. Warwick needs to hand back. Jones, Loughlin and Thrower, they've all got a handover. And so do Cecil and Hall. So, well, Roddy, I'm trying to work this out in my head. What numbers were we talking about? Because for Bailey Hall and for Nathan Higginson, we were talking about they're going to have to go to somewhere around the mid-90s to actually stop and then get their their next driver in, and then they don't have to change again.
Yeah,
but for the other ones that still have to change over, it's not as clear cut.
Yeah, I would have, if I had a whiteboard up, I would have gone the full whiteboard and kept track of this stuff. But between everything else I'm worried about, it's something I didn't quite think about until we got halfway through the race. But I think the guys that have had opportunity to plan their race out the way they want it to fall will have set it up that the laps they need for their other driver are within the realm of a soft tyre stint, which is going to be 20, 22, 23 laps, somewhere around there. Potentially a little less if they've executed properly, in which case they can run them out on sort of half fuel or part fuel and get a bit more pace out of the car. The concern is some drivers, and we'll see that in the next couple of laps, we start to see pit stops early. There might be some drivers that are a little short on their minimum lap times for their second driver, but I honestly think the exception of someone on the line of perhaps we did see Luke Speck for 20 or 30 laps, so he would be good going for another 20 lap stint after this to level it out. I'm just looking through the list. I think we've seen a pretty even share of a lot of the drivers that remain in this race. So
the real question for me is coming back to that Luke Speck, Steve Warwick argument. At what point did this change happen? Has Warwick done the minimum? I'm looking at it sort of thinking he probably has.
I think at this point Warwick has done the minimum. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Warwick was in about the 30 lap mark, so I think Warwick's done something in the region of 50, 60 laps. So he will be covered. I think Speck started. I'm pretty sure Speck started the race. I'm pretty sure he got out about lap. Oh, yeah, to be fair, Speck got out at 39. He's probably covered. I just haven't seen his name for a while, which is what's thrown me off. But if not, he might be jumping in the car at the back end. That said, I wouldn't be surprised again in their case if it's a 40-60 split, as we see Cecil in the lane, perhaps be swapping over with Burko. Yeah, with their car, Steve very much the guest driver as it were on paper, but Steve definitely also the quicker driver of the two.
No, definitely is. So Warwick going around again. I can just see on the other side there, he's definitely gone round again. Actually, Matt Cecil stayed in the car, so that's something I wasn't expecting there. So
yeah, so I potentially then that Pete will have got to his minimum. We've seen him pop up in the live chat, so I think he's very much sort of set up with possibly with a drink and is comfortable till the end of this race. So perhaps just giving Cecil a bit of chance to get some stints in, and perhaps really that helps sometimes, is just getting out there and just running laps. It sort of gets you zoned up and focused and gets you in the picture for it. And to be fair, Matt's been getting a little better as things are going on, so very much sort of coming true to that.
Just keeping an eye on Zach Brown. He's been trying to keep tabs on Hayden Cupid and is now starting to get very, very close to the back of car 119. So for Stenberg, he came over and changed precisely at about lap 55. So even if they have to stop again, and they could do another driver change if they need to, but then they'd have to put Brown back in the car. So I think Brown's just got to suck it up for the balance of the race here, and fight it out. So no matter what happens, he, I think, is probably committed to car 244 for the rest of the race, as with just keeping an eye on a few other drivers. Steve Warwick now in the lane.
Yeah, you heard a sharp intake of breath there from me. I was on board with Zach Brown as we started talking about him and Cupid. And Cupid managed to wander wide at the second last corner and get right up on the exit curb and was laying a nice big fat pair of 11s off of it, trying to get acceleration in the corner. We got very, very wide, and to be fair, probably about as sideways as you want to get before you start spinning a car under acceleration. So that was a very close moment for Cupid there. But he's definitely doing all that he can to keep Zach Brown at bay.
So here we go, heading down to turn number 11 and 12. And again, Cupid having all the questions asked of him, but no signs of any ill effects, no locked brakes, no major slides off any of the corners, and just being really well coached here. They've got is Warwick and actually Luke Speck's in that car now, so he gives them plenty of real estate on the main straight. That's actually really well done on the merge there from Speck. And he's now a lap down, but then there are a number of drivers still working through pit stops and pit stop sequences at the moment. So the race leader's got the margin out to 36 seconds, and then Wedding has only cleared off from Boak by about 1.2. So there's actually not it hasn't ballooned out at the same rate that I was sort of expecting that to balloon out. There is the margin visually. You can see they're Wedding through 6, and then in behind him is Boak, and then the other two we were just watching are just starting to crest the top of the hill at the moment.
I was just keeping an eye on the chat. Steve confirming that Matt is into to lap 112, so they're going to have a half final stint, where, I think, with Burko in the car, just to try and get themselves back into a picture of things. And they're running pretty well. They are now a lap down, but they've got a little battle pack of lap down cars to work with. Specky now down a lap as well, and Higginson, who's just left the lane actually, so he's back on board the 00, so he'll be good to the end of the race now as well.
Yeah, because he came in at lap 37 and Bailey Hall's been in since lap 38. So Bailey Hall's done almost 60 laps. He's done about, I think it's 57 laps, so he's well and truly past the minimums. Zach Brown now in the lane. Okay, so this is now for them. He can't change. He'll have to stay in the car. And as I said, I think he's pretty much a suck it and see approach now. So that relieves some of the pressure on Hayden Cupid. But importantly, there's a run to the flag here now going on. There's at least 2 more stops for all the front runners now between now and the end of the race. And how do you actually slice and dice this one up? So Mackenzie will be readying himself to get back into this car. The question is when?
He's gonna. I think realistically, we talked about 23, 24. Realistically, from now, when Zach's probably the first one of that trigger set.
I reckon that's a short stop. So Zach Brown in, and I reckon that's a short stop because they know they've got to stop again. There's no choice here, but they're, I think, going very much for a sprint. And I'm looking at him down there, and I'm looking at the reaction here for Cupid and Mackenzie. So they are in. So too is Wedding.
Throwers in the lane as well.
Yeah, so there's some strategy playing out here. I actually think that what they're doing is they're going for Brown has gone for a short stop to get track position here because he knows that Cupid and Mackenzie have to change over and go again. So they might take a slightly longer stop here, but then they're going to have a shorter stop at the back end when they have to do when the laps start to wind down. So let's see where Brown ends up with this. I'm keeping an eye on Mackenzie in the lane at the moment. So Wedding in and gone. Rosella is now in and into the lane. Mackenzie just leaving the lane at the moment. So this is going to be very, very close between the 2 cars, and there has been a change here. So this is Brown and Mackenzie going to go at it here. Watch on your right-hand side. There he is. He's going to get the job done. He's going to have a full head of steam down the front straight here, and he'll have to get this move done very, very quickly. And that is the undercut in play. So slower stop because of the driver change for the 119, and a short stop with Brown just getting enough fuel in here, knowing that they have to do another stop anyway. It pays dividends.
Yeah, no, that's all right. I was just realising in my head my math is wrong, and the 29 is actually 29, not 19. So that was throwing off my math. So yeah, they will have to get into lap 100 count before they pit the final time. So that lines up with Matt speaking about when he's going to pit. We're interested to see how this will play out with all of this strategy now. I'm not sure what he's saying with 286, Rossi. The 286 is currently in the garage and has been all weekend, but good to see you're paying attention as to which car of yours is on track. It's interesting to see how this will play out now because they're both going to pit again. And it will be interesting to see where Mackenzie's set up for versus Brown. It's hard to make a call on who's quicker. We did see Mackenzie disappear at the front of the field early on compared to Brown, who was not as well. To be fair, Brown wasn't in the picture; it was Stenberg. We haven't actually seen these two playing against each other on track. I realistically think if he can sort of get he has to almost get out of his own head to get back into his head. But if Dane can get into a good spot, he probably can beat Brown. The question also then comes in the pit strategy, and I'm not saying that CRE or the SES fellas aren't thinking their way through this race, but yeah, they've got the full might of Pixel behind them in the 244. So, as I said, they're the guys that run strategy. They're the guys that run the D, the E, the S strategy to see what's going to work out. It might come down to a pace argument, that's a big wobble there for Mackenzie. It might come down to a pace argument. It might come down to a strategy argument. We've still got, best part of 30-odd laps to see.
Yeah, Boak has swapped over with Bretton Foley as well. So these guys are good till the end as well. But as for everybody else that's in the queue as well, they've all got to stop again. So that means that the drivers that are all there that are on the lead lap right now, as the timing tree starts to shake out, they have actually all got to stop one last time. The question is when and how do you actually do it?
Yeah, just was going through the field to see who's you'll let yet to pit. Darren Logan was obviously one of them. He's had a small mistake through one, which has dropped him behind Lewis Wedding, but to be fair, he's going to be behind Lewis Wedding on pace anyway, having not yet stopped. And I think Rosella, I know Rosella, we have seen him through the lane, so Rosella's just checked out at this point. He's got a 35-second lead over Wedding.
Yeah, so he's the odd one in the equation right now, Rosella, having plenty of time in his pocket. He can afford to actually stop whenever he chooses to go from here. But Loughnane and Green are the odd ones out at the moment. And I actually expect that there's got to be another driver change here, as there's a major shortcut of the chicane there for Darren Loughnane. Amazing to see that this car is, I think, is the only one really flying the flag at the moment for the actually for the CRE amped up racing stable, because all the other three CRE Mustangs or backed Mustangs have fallen by the wayside. And here we go. There's the stop.
The only other one, and I say this not so I don't cover over doing discredit for the car. Matt Cecil and Steve Burko are still out there in the CRE Performance Mustang as well, but they're in my head a bit more of a customer team than one of the factory squads. But yeah, they're still out there doing pretty well as well. They could be picking up some points for their team effort. But yeah, definitely for the sort of the main four, it's just this car left at this point.
Yeah, Redmond I've also noticed has climbed back aboard the 43 as well. So he's now coming around the bottom of the corner as well. And I'm expecting Darren Loughnane to hand back over to Anthony Green for a final run to the flag here.
And we should get an indication soon.
Yep, just the car's on the ground waiting for it to be driven away. And
there we go.
There it is, Green. Anthony Green in the car. So Redmond goes through, Green takes over, so that'll be good to the end. So I'm not expecting any more driver swaps from this point in time onwards. I don't think there'll be anything more to be concerned about. It'll just be a matter for the race officials just to go and do all the math after the race is over and make sure that everybody has indeed met the minimum lap count.
Yeah, I think the only one that was mentioned earlier by Steve is that that car will probably be in around lap 112, just to get Steve in to finish off the last little half sprint.
Yeah, so that'll be just a matter of getting them classified and going to the finish at this point in time. They've still well commissioned. Oh, down the escape road, Ryan Smith down at turn number 9. He is done, and I got a funny feeling this might draw the officials to call a yellow flag.
That's a very yeah. I'm trying to pick what's happening.
And it has. So down the escape road, and looking to see whether that was actually a genuine driving error heading down the hill, but it causes the necessitates a recovery, and Smith had blown the engine at the top of the hill. So yeah, downshifted too many.
Another double downshift, and that was a shame because like they were quietly plugging away. We did mention them earlier. They were having a strong performance, pulling it out. It'd be interesting if anybody takes the opportunity for a pit here. If anybody does, it would be, I was about to say it, probably was one of the Pixel cars.
Yep.
It's interesting where it falls. This isn't quite at the window for a soft tire run to the end. It's just a bit long, but if safety car hangs out for a few laps,
it's Wedding,
they might
Brown,
the window.
Wedding and Brown both in, and this is a real awkward time for a safety car to come out to stop. This is the bit that I think has caught a few people off guard. Safety car departing the lane now. So Mackenzie's gone through, so too Foley, and Rosella actually coming into the lane as well. So this is going to be a fuel save strat from here. What do you do?
If you can get the fuel running, honestly at this point, I think you grab the hard tyre.
Yeah, I think you've got to think about it, but you've got to remember too, the fuel range window at 4 odd litres a lap is only going to be about 25, 26 laps, so you're borderline being able to make it from here.
Yeah, but if the safety car runs long enough and you can sip the first few laps and pick up a lap somewhere else, I think like that. And to be fair, if I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I think from what we can tell, we're not getting a good picture of it because we're seeing conflicting reports on what we said earlier about tyres, but I'd be very surprised if someone isn't at least considering hard tyres at this point because you are so close to the fuel window, but you are nowhere near the soft tyre window. Yeah. So I think your best option is to at least consider the hards.
So Foley has gone into the lane as well here. Mackenzie's gone through because he's gone through to second place. So Rosella's been in and gone. So now importantly, everyone was only in not all that long ago. Rosella had time in his pocket. So whether he can make it on a fuel strat from here or not, Mackenzie, I think quite happily is just going to go around as much as he can, maybe potentially leave it until the last possible opportunity to dive for the lane. And
I think where he's at, if I was him, I'd I'd be in again. It's a tight margin. You might have to look at the hards, but you've almost got to pit now, because otherwise you have to make a green flag pit stop, and you're going to be suffering massively for it.
Yeah,
so I think you have to be in. The best chance for Mackenzie is to pit this lap, because he hasn't quite caught Rosella yet, so he's still running around at about race pace, which is the same thing that Zach Brown's currently doing, trying to catch the train.
Yeah, but I'm looking at the point of view of wondering where the safety car is on track at the moment, because it's part of the lane.
I think Rosella's getting close to having caught it, so I think you're going to be in this lap though.
Actually, there's cars behind us. Yeah, there's cars trapped behind
which is not in. He's not in. So I think. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think at this point, this and the calls around it might have very much okay, that was odd. Might have very much broken things for Mackenzie, but I don't know. There might have something that I'm not seeing, but I think you had to be in, even if it was for a hard tire and a fuel conservation. You had to be in the lane at that thing. Rossi just said you run fuel save with pace, so by all means. But I think you're still going to be quicker if you try and save for a couple of laps than pitting again, unless you're going to do a really, really short fill.
Well, this is the real interesting bit. There's some lap traffic in here that needs to get going, and that's Higginson and Luke Speckers. There's a 10-second stop-go penalty issued for Tim Redmond. I'm not sure what that's all for.
He probably by virtue of having passed the safety car.
Oh, yes, so that'll be fine.
Pitting.
That'll be fine.
Yeah.
So that'll actually be cleared for those guys. So that gets these gentlemen all back onto the lead lap. So still 10 cars in this race, but I can see Redmond actually is in the lane. Oops, there's been I think there might have been a change of position. I'm not sure if it was a change of position or not. Maybe it might have been to do with some lap traffic or something happening there. This safety car's going on for a little while at the moment, but where on earth is everybody else in this equation? That's the bit that I'm trying to work out. So Redmond has left the lane. He's just left the lane now, actually coming out in 8th place, just ahead of those team members, that the Beyond Stable and the CRE, so the PBF Race Engineering Commodore that was in there as well. But it's a bit of a tardy form-up lap, I think, as well. So drivers are just starting to catch the back of the safety car now as well. There you go. There's a trigger being pulled. I could just see it there. Lewis Wedding deciding, you know what, he has to come in because he knows that fuel strat is the name of the game here. So the later you can leave it, the better off you are. But
yeah, I would say Wedding. I'm not sure what he's at on tyre necessarily, but I would imagine he's very much pulling. He's very much going to try the gamble. I know Rossi said you won't fuel save, but I think you're going to have to try and do something with the fuel from this point onwards. I really think that's the winning strategy, and I imagine that's where Wedding's going. He's going to do his best. He's going to throw the kitchen sink at it. He might fall a lap short, but if he doesn't, he's going to win this.
Yeah.
Or not win this, but he's definitely going to win a battle he's having elsewhere on track, because. Yeah, it's becoming a Monza. Which is probably one of the which Monza traditionally has the best endings. Higginson, same thing for Redmond. He would have rolled to the safety car and then come into the lane, so that'll be cleared. But yeah, I think it's the same thing as we've seen at Monza years gone past. It's going to be a conservation race. I think that's where the winning strat comes from. If you can get the fuel to make it to the end, I think that's what you've got to do to win this race. Yeah,
so Wedding and Redmond are now trying to play catch up to the back of the train here. I think potentially Mackenzie's missed a trick here. I think that they needed, if the safety car goes around again, they need to come in this lap. They need to bite the bullet, and they need to pack the thing with fuel. Probably put it's going to be borderline. You might be able to get away with the soft tyre, because there'll only be about 24 laps or so left, but you'd be in the fuel window. So I think you might be okay to make it happen. But if the safety car goes around again, they have to come in this lap. Otherwise, they're pitting under green and their race is done.
Yeah, I think that's the only option. I'm not seeing any major checkup from Luke Rosell at the head of the train. I'm seeing a bit of an eke out.
I think now.
I think we're potentially.
No,
maybe not.
They're going around again. I think they're too close to the safety car this time around, so they have to come in. I think this is the only way this is going to work. Yeah, safety car's going here, and they've got to get in the lane, and they haven't bitten the bullet, and I think that is a dreadful move that is going to cost them in this race. And I think they're going to be jumped by the likes of Boken, Foley and co that actually have come into the lane after all of that. I think that is unfortunately the winning strat, that they needed to be in the lane now. Like Foley is, like Brown is, they needed to come in and pack the thing full of fuel, because they now don't have to stop again. whereas Mackenzie is definitely going to have to. And I think he's probably banking on the fact that Rosella probably has to as well.
Yeah, I think Rosella's probably tight. The strat's going to be the strat. Unfortunately, for the guys at the front, is going to be to not do race pace for a bit there. We'd like to hit the tyre walls, Rossi, but to be fair, we haven't got a clear assessment from most of the stuff we've been calling so far. But I think that's an indication that somebody's out there on hards.
Yeah,
somebody hasn't been listening to me.
Well, I mean, I've been calling it. Some of the drivers have been on hards all day, but having a look at when Rosella's, I can see it at the slower pace of the speed. It does look like it is white versus another one behind, which is the car behind looks like it's white as well. So I'm not really 100% sure in this if it's actually genuinely white or yellow or not. But
yeah,
for me, it's not about the tyres. It's not about the tyres. It's about the fuel. It's about the fuel.
Yeah, but the tyres indicate at least where you're going. If you're running softs, you're not even. I don't think you're really even considering trying to make this one final stint. With the hards, you've committed to that being the option.
Yeah, you have.
So I think the only thing that's going to save Mackenzie at this point is another safety. Honestly, another safety car. A further safety car is going to be the only thing I think that brings. Unless a pair of us are missing something. I think that's the only thing that brings him back into it.
Well, we're going back to green flag racing at the end of lap 106. So this is going to end up with a 23-lap sprint to the end, and there's going to be drivers that have to stop in this as well. So there's a very muddled up order behind the top two, because you've got Anthony Green and Matt Cecil that are in there, Tim Redmond, Lewis Wedding. Everybody's back on the lead lap with 23 laps to run here, and this is for the Sandown 400 title. From here on in, watch the kitchen sink get thrown.
Yeah, so a good start there for Luke Rosella. As we mentioned, good chance that he is on the hard tyre from what Rossi's told us. So he's going to have a bit of a struggle out of the corner here.
Look at 3 wide almost for a very brief period of time back here as well, with Cecil trying to hold his own. And Redmond looking in there as well. Cecil with a bit of a wiggle here. That's going to check up Lewis Wedding as they head to the chicane here. They're keeping in mind the Pepsi Max machine has actually got to stop again, because they've got driver minimums that they need to sort out. So that safety car didn't fall kindly for them. They will have to do at least one more stop to get through.
Yeah, so very much of a race for glory here for Matt Cecil rather than any positions. He'll very much help himself out, setting himself up in a good spot. But yeah, very much also.
Getting interesting.
Foley and Wedding.
Getting interesting here, and they've both gone wide. They've both gone very, very wide there, and that could have been an airplane accident very, very quickly. And Foley
contact as well between Foley and Speck, and I think Zach Brown was tacked up in that as well.
Yeah, he was too. That got very, very interesting very quickly. Thankfully, didn't result in a major incident for Foley, but the old-timers went at it there and very nearly came to blows.
Yeah, so very willing stuff early on. Tim Redmond taking advantage of a little bit of excursion on the curb there for Matt Cecil to move on through. Matt Cecil actually a slightly better run out of the corner somehow as a result with a bit of the slipstream. He again, very much he can fight these guys if he wants to. He's under no obligation to wave the white flag, but he will be in again. And a lot of these guys will probably be good to the end outside of a little bit of a fuel concern.
Yeah, I think so too. So Redmond has actually moved up to P4 out of all of that, and this battle pack's still willing, still going on here. So Cecil, Wedding, Foley now trying to make his way through as well. And Pepsi Max machine's making it very, very awkward for them heading up the hill. So you've got to just pick your battles, bide your time here.
Oh no.
And second time of asking at the restart here, nose to tail, Wedding and Foley get through. Speck's looking to line up the Mustang as well, and he does down the inside there. That's a tight gap to fit it into, and he did, but then he's now going to drop a spot, not only to the car that he just passed. Brown's going to have a go at the outside here as well, and he's going to make that stick and get the position back, and then it's Nathan Higginson all over the back of Luke Speck as well.
That was some very aware driving from either Speck or Cecil on the cars around him for that to only be a single car incident there. That could have been an airplane crash. So that was very, very good attention from everyone around us. I can see what Specky was trying to do. I think he just had a bit too much to try and do all in one corner. And he's now fallen in behind Higginson. He can jump on the back of this train and get back into it again. Yeah,
he certainly can. So they'll keep going. Surprisingly, the big equation in here that I want to look at is Anthony Green. So he's actually moved up to position 3 out of all of that. So the sole CRE-backed Mustang that's left in the field is actually in a good spot here as well. But with whatever strategy they need to play fuel-wise or tyre-wise, they're good on drivers to the end of the race. But they just got to keep plodding along and bringing it home here. They're keeping tabs on Dane McKenzie ahead. don't discount Tim Redmond. He's actually got a good turn of speed there as well, but I don't think anyone's got anything for Luke Rosella at the moment.
Exactly, yeah. Even if he is out there on hard tyres, and Rossi helpfully is giving us a clue, but not actually giving us the answer. Even if he is out there on hard, he's getting a very good solid run in. I would imagine. I don't know. I don't think Dane's playing a fuel game, but I don't
contact in the final corner, and it's got a few cars out of action here. And
another safety car.
No, and another safety car triggered as a result. So some drivers in the lane there. So this now takes the strategy out of the equation completely. Everybody will probably be in the lane. I expect full soft tyres going on cars after this.
Yeah, the only concern is going to be has Cecil done his minimums, because the penciled mark was 112, and if the 112 was a number that was picked to cover him definitely, then maybe he's in now. If not, like, they're probably relying on like a 3-lap safety car if he has to get to lap 112 to put Steve in the car.
Well, we don't know what the answer is there, but we do know is this is what happened on the replay here. So Brown went up the inside of Matt Cecil, who had his nose in there. There was the contact there. Cecil off the road, he lit it up into Higginson. Nowhere to go. Higginson, the instant party in there. 3-car train wreck, and that's the end of that. So this then will basically mean that the field, I expect pretty much most people will be in the lane after this. Yeah, they are. I can see them all turning up in the lane now. So Rosella in. That actually lets Mackenzie and co off the hook, because they were going to have to stop under a green flag situation and probably were going to be out of this race. So if there was a strategy car that was being pulled by Rosella and Ross, that strategy card as it basically put them on the same even keeling as everybody else, but they just basically means they're probably going to be at the front of the field anyway.
Yeah, so Rosella and Ross will be a straight run to the flag. We'll be on soft tyres. Zach Brown, that's a bit awkward. I think it's potentially going to be an issue of a unsafe release, but that's not really something we can worry about right now. But yeah, Reese McGillivray in the chat. Yeah, look, we did doubt Dane's call because Dane's call relied on a safety car, and there was no hard guarantee of that, if we're honest, Reese.
Yeah, that's the luck of the draw.
He's gotten off the hook here, but it was by no means guaranteed.
That's right.
He's very much rolled the dice there, and the dice will come out in his favour, but that doesn't always play that out that way. But in the end, yeah, it's now up to what Dane McKenzie can do behind the wheel of the 119.
That's it. Now, importantly for Cecil, he's gone through to take the lead of the race. He is on the lead lap here, but he does need to stop and change over to Steve Burko again. So, there's a bit of awkward checking up here.
As the safety car checks up, yep. And it's funny, it's interesting, yeah, so Higginson obviously check up as well, because Higginson has been let through to get back to the field, but Cecil's going to have to probably be, well, that's the thing, if he's going to get to 112, he's going to get to 112, so he's going to sit at the head of this queue until he hits the lap that he needs, and I imagine that means he's going to go around another lap again.
Well, it depends on what the number was, and if the number was 112, then yeah, the number is 112, but the real question is, if the safety car is coming in this lap, then he'll be coming in at the head of the queue, potentially, so we don't know.
Yeah, it might come in at the end of this lap, which will be a bit awkward, but at least for Cecil, he will at least partially get the pit stop done under safety car conditions. Whether he exits under safety car conditions is up to the safety car. But at the very least, he can get to 112 under safety car conditions.
Yeah, so that's right. So, whoops! What on earth was going on there with Matt Cecil? He is not permitted to pass the safety car at this point, so he is the leader. He has to stay right where he is.
Yeah, and it's not going to help him running in the safety car because he's going to pick up damage he's going to probably want to repair in the pit stop.
Yeah, and this is the thing. We often tell drivers that they need to leave a bit of a gap between the safety car as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we got Des Bruce in the chat pointing out this is going to be one hell of a race to finish, and that's a pretty good call. Rossi, yeah, it's a good question. I'm going to guess he didn't expect the safety car to check up quite as much as it does, and there are some tracks where the safety car is having a proper crack, and there are some safety cars where, some tracks where the safety car has definitely been on the red wine. So, Sandown being a bit more of one of the latter.
Yes. All right, so we actually expect that the 788 machine will be in this lap. They will fall to the back of the field, but they will have, obviously, fresh tyres, and they will have Steve Burko at the wheel. That will mean that your effective race leader is, at the moment, the 888 machine of Luke Rosella and Brendan Ross. Dane McKenzie in second, Anthony Green good to the finish in third. So everybody from second on back is good on drivers and their minimum laps to the finish. real question is just about finding out how many more laps we're going to complete under the safety car here. Now, is Cecil going to come in?
I think we're getting one more lap of safety car. They're well too close to the safety car to try and get a restart going. Oh, no, safety car's coming in.
Safety car is coming in. Wow, okay.
No, this could go bad.
This could end up as a bit of a difficult situation here because you have got Matt Cecil at the head of the queue. He will take the restart here, but he's going to be absolutely swamped on the run to the line. He could actually play an unexpected influence in this situation with all the drivers here because he has got to get into the lane and he has got to get that lap done. So they were that driver change done. So they were banking on that going an extra lap, and it unfortunately did not. So for Cecil, he's going to be harassed left, right, and centre here. And
there is harassment everywhere. Rosella with a very ambitious dive there. In the end, he's not only let Cecil back through, he's let Redmond, Mackenzie, Wedding through all in that. So that was a very ambitious move. Not sure what the argument would be there. Particularly, Matt Cecil is entitled to race for first place. He is out there at the lead of the pack. That potentially go down a little interesting later. The other interesting part, Redmond is up to second now.
He is up to second now, and he's fighting it out with Mackenzie at the front here. Wedding's buying into the third place here. There's a couple of cars wide here, and there's going to be leaning.
No, there's not going to be room there.
There's not room there. There's going to be some leaning on cars in this last sort of 16 laps or so. Wedding looking for the race lead here. He's going to be on the outside. He was caught out here last night with Noah Tara. This time he's got the nose up there, so Mackenzie has to leave the room as Rosella slices back in front of Tim Redmond, and Mackenzie goes to the head of the queue. Did Cecil get in the lane? No, he didn't. He has to just fight it out and just find a spot to get into the lane to do that last driver change.
I think he's just done that now. I think he's just dropped in the lane now. So Burke will be in the car from the end. Big dive there from Waiting. He missed the corner entirely.
Yeah, he missed it entirely there. That was never going to happen. That was a late lunge here, and now defensive drive down the right-hand side of the track here for Dane Mackenzie. And it's not his fault now that he's been sort of caught short in a little bit of this, but Rosella having lost out there at the turn 4, the last lap, in prime position to go through here. As I can see, it looks like Cecil actually dropped out of the race before he managed to get into the lane.
Bugger, that's really poor timing, so that's really unfortunate for Burko. They were doing all they needed to get to the end, and it's come right proper at the end there. It's a shame. Yep,
so Mackenzie now has let Rosella through into the race lead, so he's now under increasing pressure from Redmond here. So it was on at the start, kitchen sink was thrown a few times there, and in the back of shot there. I'm not sure if the top 3 is fully settled entirely just yet. So Wedding has now got his hands full with Foley's. The two veterans are about to go at it down the front straightaway here in the closing laps. Foley with the inside line, and he'll have the preferred angle for turn number 1, but now he's got to just hang it around the outside, give Wedding the opportunity at 2, and then be on the correct side for when they get to turn 4. A little bit of push and shove. Wedding almost in the barriers, and through goes Foley.
Yeah, to quickly back up, and Steve just brought out the point I was about to make. No, Matt had kept going. Coming through turn 4 was that ground. He just disappeared from the track entirely. So potentially in hindsight, maybe putting Burke on the car, at the end of the first safety car restart lap would have been the move. But you don't know that Matt's 4 corners off disconnecting. So that's really unfortunate for those guys. They will still, I think, hit 80%. So they probably will still end up with points, but they won't be finishing this race.
Yeah, they won't be classified because the car's not running at the checkered flag. That's the important bit of the equation. So they may have met the driver minimums, but unfortunately for them, they have not seen the checkered flag. So that's now settled down a little bit after all of that. So Rosella clearly out in front from Mackenzie and Redmond, and then with Foley going through to 4th, Wedding has now had a bit of a fight on his hands to stave off Anthony Green from the Super 2 Development Series for 5th place there. That's actually now putting Green back into the clutches of Zach Brown.
Yeah, this is going to bring... it's interesting to see how Zach's buying back into this as well, because he was tangled up in the incident that caused the safety car to begin with. A little bit of damage perhaps on the front of that car. I don't think it's seen... Well, it was seen a bit to the lane. Whether they would have elected to repair the damage or not, I don't know, in trying to get back out in the order of the queue in the pit lane. But... yeah, a bit of a battle now as we're working on the last 13 or 14 laps of this race.
Down the hill into Dandenong Road. Still about a part of 13 laps to go after this one, so still a fair way. It's still a sprint finish, but still got some management of tyres and things to go on throughout all of this.
Yeah, I think time management, you're probably pretty good unless you're having a genuinely hard crack at it. You're just about in the window for the tyres, but I think you're probably going to be pretty good. You might have to be a little bit of conservation in places, but it's really just avoiding flat spotting it.
Foley threatening Tim Redmond here for third place. Been a good drive from these guys. Started 10th up to third, kept their nose relatively clean all race long. Avoided any of the major carnage. And then Boak and Foley have had a pretty clean day as well. So third place might not be done and dusted just yet. Good margin for the top two at the moment. They're clearing out. And Redmond has had his fair share of battles this year. He's had some foot dramas that he was, I think, right foot braking at one point earlier in the season. And he's had a few other little health dramas, and they always haven't had the full team together with himself and Pete Thrower and NZ Snipes and Cheese in the main game this year. So it's been a bit of a difficult season for the Kiwis, but third place in one of the feature events, I think, for this year will definitely go a long way to soothing those pains if they can hold on.
Yeah, they've got Brendan Foley in the back and very much sort of reinvigorated off of how yesterday went. As I mentioned, him and Boki probably feeling a little bit second-hand after the nights they had last night, but I don't think it's affecting them much at this point. Yeah, Foley's definitely in the window to have a crack here. Pete Thrower confirming that Redmond is still driving with 1 foot, so there's an extra challenge as well for Redmond, having done the length of the race he's been doing to do that off of 1 foot. So, yeah, definitely, if he does get that podium, definitely well earned with the effort he's put into this, but he's still got work to go. Foley's still right there, and Wedding's dropped back a little bit, but don't count him out just yet.
It's almost like the Mustang has a parachute on the back of it heading up the main straight, such as the difference, or the back straight, such as the difference in the speed with the draft in play here as well. But Foley was offered the outside and didn't take it. Redmond very astute and very much awake there, trying to defend the spot, and he's going to have to do that at least another dozen more times. And then Foley is going to have to do the same with Lewis Wedding. And see the background too, looks like Zach Brown's managed to get a move done on Anthony Green there, finally, after a couple of times asking. So Brown moves up to 6th place. It was a good drive from Stenberg early on to put that car in good position, but just the back end of it hasn't quite worked out the way that they wanted it. Safety cars falling where they have. And now Foley finally up the inside of Redmond at turn number 1, but he's wide, and he's going to drop
just a little bit too deep there for Foley, which is what ran him wide. Not quite enough exit curve there for his liking, and it's put him to the back of Wedding and Redmond. And now it's Wedding's going to have a chance at Redmond. Foley, perhaps a little bit more polite, if a way of putting it, with Redmond. I'm not saying that Lewis won't be, but yeah, you know, Lewis has been around the traps. Lewis knows how to put a good fight up, so it's going to be a real challenge now for Redmond.
Here we go. Going to go the long way around. Going to try the Foley thing, and it leaves him a bit of room there. Redmond very, very accommodating for Wedding around the outside of there and sticks it in there. Seen plenty of drivers sort of run their counterparts wide at turn number 7, and then Redmond actually comes out with the whole shot here, drops into defensive position. Wedding goes the long way around, makes that pass stick, and that
bit of contact,
but that should be it.
Yeah, that's pretty well set up. Foley pretty close to having a good run there, not quite. So in Slipstream, there's definitely some Monza spec snakies kicking on now. A little bit of trying to worry about Slipstream. Redmond actually with a big run over Wedding, going to try and go on the outside at 1.
Oh, that's ambitious.
And a bit of a slide move for Wedding. It's brought Brown into this now. It's going to be a 4-car battle.
Yep, this is all kicking off at the back end. I think we're going to have to stay with this one for the moment, because this is where all the action is currently at. And it is costing them lap time as well. You know, they're in the 10s versus the drivers behind that are in the 8s and the 9s. So if they put this up for too much longer, there's going to be others that will start to bite into it. So Anthony Green's just playing the smart game here. He's just sitting at the back waiting for something to happen here, and then just to sail on through when the parting of the Red Seas that he hopes inevitably will occur.
Yeah, a bit of a wide run through.
Bit of a shove there for Wedding.
Yeah, they're definitely not afraid to get over that at this point. They're into the last, starting lap 121 of 129 pretty soon, and yeah, definitely getting to the final stages of this race. And gloves are probably not far off of coming off.
Oh mate, I think the gloves went out about 3 laps ago. It's now it's like a bare knuckle fist fight right now.
No, absolutely. Yeah, there's still definitely a little bit of modicum, bit of respect in play, but yeah, they're definitely going to the degree, and they're giving just enough room as what they're obligated to do, and not really much past that.
No, definitely not. So, last lap times around for all these drivers: Redmond a 9.8, and everybody else a 10 or a 10 low or a 9.8. And then you got Higginson and Speckens, and not even threatening at the moment. They've actually dropped out of this, so they're actually not making any ground on this group of cars at all.
Yeah, they're in a good spot, at least if something monumentally happens, and we're threatening a 5-car train here, so it's a potential. Or Wedding.
Oh, God, yeah, he's well out of commission there. Where's he going to feed back on? Oh, he's actually done worse than that. He's hit the barriers. He's going to be in a gravel trap. There he is, and he's going to have to get out of that. There was no way he was pulling that car up.
Yeah, I saw that from...
Oh, and the rejoin right in front of Higginson almost is going to go down as unsafe.
Yeah, I missed that and all that as well, but I can see perhaps why that would have happened. Lewis would have been pretty filthy with himself after that.
Here it is on the replay, so watch where he was. We have actually just cut the replay short to see it. So he went all the way out here and had to bring it back on, so avoids the going to the gravel trap. But watch this on the rejoin. This was the bit that was the difficult bit for me. Pulling back onto the track right as the cars were about to emerge in front of him, and I dare say one could probably call that an unsafe rejoin.
Quite potentially, yeah. Higginson definitely had to get out of the throttle to avoid it there, and yeah, I can see how you get there. He's been running hard all race, Lewis. It definitely feels like a bit of a redemption after him after how his Supercars season has gone. He was in the window for it, but yeah, that move, I saw it coming as soon as Tim Redmond was on the brakes, because Wedding sailed straight through, and I was amazed he didn't end up in the tyre wall. Well, to be fair, the only reason he didn't end up any more damage there is because we've moved the tyre wall in the last few years. If the tyre wall was in the pre like 2019 spot, he would have probably pancaked that car.
He would have become Todd Hazelwood, basically.
Yeah, he would have had a Hazelwood. So yeah. He's lucky in that one, but still he's going to be very filthy.
But you know what? This came back to what I talked about probably about an hour and a half ago. And this is to do with putting drivers in positions where they inevitably make the wrong mistakes. And Redmond had played the defensive act for several straight laps. He did everything perfectly legal. He moved over to the left-hand side to defend his position into turn 6, and he offered Wedding the outside. Wedding took the bait and unfortunately mucked it up. And that's what happens in situations like this. You put your fellow counterparts in a position where they are forced to make a choice, and if they make the wrong choice or they muck up that choice, it works in your favour. And unfortunately for Wedding it didn't work out, for Redmond it did.
Yeah, and in the end all that's done actually is given Redmond a healthy second gap over the rest of the train that was forming. What's actually now playing out now in terms of close battles is a battle between Brenton Foley and Zach Brown, and this is an interesting one to play out because they've been teammates for all but this round this year. They
have. So yeah, normally they occupy the two PBF Race Engineering Commodores in the main game, but for Zach Brown, he's I guess taken quote-unquote under contract for the Enduro Cup situation for the 3 races or 3 rounds, and he's in a competing car here, so these two know each other fairly well, and Brown has definitely got a good head of steam under him, can potentially take it away here from Foley.
Yellow flag at 1.
Yellow flag at turn 1. What's that for? It's for is that McKenzie? Gone! There's an engine gone aboard the McKenzie machine, so that is a heartbreak for them. They are out of business and in the garage, and that is that.
Oh no, that's...
And it's popped going down the main straight by the look of it as well. On the downshift, on the brakes, there it goes. Compression lock on the rear, and I don't know what more you can say. Drove faultlessly all day long.
Yeah, that's gonna sting big time. So yeah, we're down to what we had 6 or 7 series cars start the race. We're down to 2.
We are down to 2.
Oh dear.
Wow.
Sorry, we're down to 1. Sorry, because we lost Cecil as well. So the only series car left of the entire series Empire
is the green and Glockner Mustang. Yes.
Yeah, that's the only car left at this point. So So at this point, the battle for what was 3rd is now the battle for 2nd, and all of a sudden Foley's gone for fighting for not from the podium to fighting to stay on the podium with Zach Brown. But he's making a move now on Tim Redmond at turn 1.
He is indeed. So this has become the battle for the final positions on the rostrum. It's not just the final position for the spot for the last one, as Redmond says, no, you're not. Go through there, and a little bit of contact but this has become the battle for second and third, not just for third, as Foley got a love tap from his teammate, and he's going to try and return the serve here up the back straight.
Yeah, this is. I really don't like this because these guys have to work together in a few weeks' time at Simmons Plains. I really don't want bad blood between the teammates. But yeah, this is definitely willing stuff. They're all racing for something. They're all racing individually for the remaining biggest teams in the championship. You know, we got PBF in this. We've got the Pixel guys in this. We got the Kiwis in this, and it's all willing. A bit
Foley
of
goes through.
Yeah,
how did that happen?
I think there's a bit of contact there, either from Brown or from Foley, but either way, it shuffled Tim wide, and Foley's gotten through.
Yeah, I want to go back and have a little bit of a look at that, actually, because that was a most interesting sort of situation that just sort of unfolded. So we'll keep an eye on that while we go and have a look at the what happened up the back here. Let's actually just keep a bit of an open mind, I guess, as to what happened. So Redmond was ahead. He was a bit wide there. Foley locked it up under brakes. Oh, there was some... Oh, there it was. It was Brown gave a little bit of a shove to Redmond, which I don't think he was quite prepared for, and that's what allowed Foley to slip through. That was on the corner exit.
Yeah, so, I could perhaps see the perception where the car jumped. You might have thought, oh, Foley got into the side of him, but no, Foley was, he wasn't clear, but he wasn't the one making contact. So,
no.
Yeah, in the end, he's now got to try and get back on. He's still got a spot on the podium, does Redmond, but he's now got to fight Redmond for it, and probably feels like he should be a little further up.
Redmond's got to fight Redmond. That's very, very interesting.
Sorry, Redmond's got to find Brown. I'm amazed I got that far with this far without a mistake. But yeah, Redmond's going to fight Brown for the podium. But he still probably feels like, even though Foley wasn't the instigator for that, he probably still feels like he should be in second.
Well, I mean, this will be a one hell of an effort if Redmond can hold on ahead of a rampaging Zach Brown for the next 3 laps. He's done everything right that he could possibly do since the safety car restart and defended every time into turn 6, and he's had the ability to hold off the 244 in all other parts of the circuit. Brown tries a bit more mid-corner speed there at turn number 1. A little bit of Morse code on the rear of car 43. No way through there. Got to throw the dummy somewhere. You've got to think about where you're stronger, where you're weaker. It's not going away. He gives the car. Did he give a little bit of a nudge through turn 4 there? I think he did.
I think so, yeah. The flash of the headlights, which indicates disapproval from Redmond somewhere in that. And what it's done is brought Green to this as well. And Green, very much, not a horse in this fight, but I mean, if the fight's there to have, I think he's gonna jump in and have it. Yep. So outside off it again. Redmond says, well, you can go the long way here, or you can take the approach and go the other way. And Brown has to pull in behind there. So a little bit of maybe some unsportsmanlike driving here, just giving a little bit of nudges at precisely the wrong moment. Very nearly cost Redmond 2 spots there. Actually, very nearly cost them both 2 spots because Green was right in there coming out of turn 4, but he drops back a little bit coming out of the last couple of corners. Yeah, honestly, I think at this point, if you're Green, you don't want to DNF this race, but you've got a pretty healthy gap back to 6th. I reckon you have a bit of a crack here if the door opens up for you. Well, there you go. Brown finally through at turn number 1. Has Redmond got anything left to throw at Zach Brown in the closing couple of laps? Foley's got a clear air margin at the moment with 1.5 to go. Yeah, a bit wide there off the corner for Redmond, but he is still in range of slipstream. He's going to get a bit of a toe up the straight here. I don't think he's quite going to end up being close enough, but he can definitely at least try and get to the headspace of Zach Brown. Maybe a little bit late on the brakes might help him rein in, but he's going to carry the speed through the corner well wide of the apex there as well. I think he's starting to struggle on those tyres. Yeah, starting to as the race wears off, I think, and the bar adjustments and things probably aren't quite going the way that he wants. So for Brown, that should be him through to position number 3. And Redmond now left to fight off Anthony Green as white flag's out and the race leader's on his final tour. Yeah, so a 20-second lead at this point for Luke Rosella. Not much that could go to interfere with his race, although to be fair, we've seen plenty of drivers so far today have individual issues of their own, but he's got half the length of the circuit left to go. Foley back there with a 2-second gap over Zach Brown, who at this point is starting to pull away from Tim Redmond. Race leader through the final sequence of corners, heading down the hill into turn number 9 for the final time. So 129 laps and 2 hours and 41 and a bit minutes later, we finally have ourselves a winner in the Sandown 400, and it's going to be car 888
Brendan Ross and Luke Rosella will prevail, and they will take home 300 magnificent championship points each.
Yes, very good run in the end from the pair of them, and unsurprisingly, Luke Rosella, once he's in the car, was more or less unstoppable. Coming to the line now in second, it's getting a little bit close at the end, but I think he will still hold on. Brenton Foley, a bit of a surprise packet starting from third for the race, but managed to improve upon it and comes home in second with Phil Boak for PBF Engineering, with Kurt Stenberg and Zach Brown coming home in third for Fuchs HSB dealer team, and it looked pretty close at the end between Green and Redmond.
Yeah, it was. Redmond held off Green by about 0.3 of a second there, so Redmond home for fourth, Green fifth, and then Wedding home for sixth after that desperate lunge at the top of the hill didn't quite net any result for him. And then you ended up with the last classified finishers, Nathan Higginson and Bailey Hall home for seventh, and then Luke Speck and Steve Warwick, they're coming home now, so they'll finish in eighth place. So all those drivers will finish on the lead lap, and then from ninth on back, Cupid McKenzie non-finish, so too Matt Cecil and Steve Burko, Ryan Smith, Kai Jones, Stuart McNichol and Leonard Grossel, Callahan and McDonald, Turra and Locke, Rutledge and Cox, Dostal and Hall, Brown alongside Jesse Bennett, and then the big ones, the ones that started from the front row of the grid, Egmanis and Devonish also out.
Yeah, there's going to be definitely some tales of triumph from this, a lot of tales of woe, and yeah, the drop round will cushion the fall for some of these guys, but I think there's still going to have some longer term ramifications as we get into the back end of the main season.
Yeah, I think so. Still a lot of ramifications to be worked out through all of this. And all these guys are going to be pleased as punch starting as high up the grid as they did. Higginson will just be happy, I think, just to bring the car home after 129 laps. So I think that's probably the silver lining for them in this round, is that they actually have indeed gotten home. Just having a look here as well, the fastest lap of the race actually was ended up with car 119 when Dane McKenzie was in the car doing a 7 flat in the early going. I think that was in the first stint of the race, and actually it was never ever headed, which is a big surprise. All things considered, Rosella's fastest lap was actually 0.3 of a second slower. So
yeah, so Dane was just in a really good spot for the first stint. In
that early then, so. Well, looking at everybody that's on there, actually none of the non-finishers, Cam, Parrott and the chat, actually are classified, because while they might have completed 80% of the race distance, they actually were not running at the checkered flag. That's the whole piece of the puzzle. You've actually got to be running at the checkered flag to actually accrue points. So everyone from 9th on back, unfortunately, is going to have a big fat donut of points added to their name.
Yeah, so it very much shakes up at least the, I suppose, the predicted order for things in the Enduro Cup, which is less of a standalone thing. This is less of a priority thing this year. Obviously, this feeds into the Supercars Championship, but as things sit currently, yeah, we've got Brendan Ross and Luke Rosella, who are in the defending team. They made the point known with their number board. So we've got the 88 and 888, but you can see a little white 1 buried in there because they are the defending team's champions for Enduro Cup. Out there leading the charge at the front, and PBF Engineering in second, with the Fuchs HSP dealer team in third. And yeah, there's a big long list of what ended up being 1 through 8, and there's a whole bunch of people tied on 9th right now.
Yeah, there definitely is. From an Enduro Cup point of view, you're absolutely right. But I mean, the more wider ramifications are going to be what actually happens when we get to the season's end for the Supercars Championship, because we do need to see how all of that works out. I'm just waiting on a few drivers to make their way in for a little bit of a chat after all that one was said and done. And well, what do you say, Rody? What can you say after a race like that?
It was like the important thing to take away. There was some really good racing there. There was definitely some moments, even for those guys that perhaps didn't have the race play the way they wanted to. They still have some moments they can pull from that, show that, either they're worthy or that they can come and play with the big boys or whatever. Like, Mackenzie and Cuppet, they're definitely in the window. We saw them already. They were comfortably second right till the end there. Tara and Locke, they were doing pretty well. Hall and Dostal, that was an early misery, unfortunately, but Dostal had such a good run there, running with the big guns as a Super 2 runner. And then yeah, like most of the guys through this field, they've done a really good job where they can. They're going to have some little bits that they can pull from. The big picture for a lot of them is sadness, but there are some little silver linings they can pull from their drives, or either individual work or teamwork, or just the ability to just keep in and putting those laps down, which is, as we've seen, everybody who finished this race did so because they finished this race, because they got to the end of the race.
Yes,
And that's where the points come from. And that's what you need to do. You don't need to be fast. You need to get to the end. That's the big key point for an endurance race.
that's exactly right. It's the old adage: to finish first you must finish. So you've actually got to get to the line first before you can, or you've got to actually finish the race before you can even be considered to be winning the race. And I mean, you've got to, yeah, that's the old adage. So with podium interviews about ready to get underway, we're actually going to change that little graphic up there that says that it's the, it's qualifying. It's actually the a little bit of a chance to change over and remind everybody that it is a round recap. It actually is the quali recap was last night when we had a little bit of a chance to chat to our drivers. But I'm not sure what order you want to start it in here, Rody, but I will preface this discussion by saying that the drivers are actually got their own graphics on the broadcast image tonight or today. So if you talk to one first and then talk to the other.
Alrighty. Well, we've got bits and bobs of each of the lineups. We are currently missing a Kurt Stenberg and a Luke Rosella. I'm not sure if the plan is for the pair of them to be jumping in the box at some point. I know we did have issues getting Luke at the last Supercars round that we're looking for him. But we'll start in the reverse order. So Zach Brown here is representing for the Fuchs HSB dealer team. Zach, pretty good run in the end for you guys.
Oh, mate, I just went out there and had a crack. Did not expect to be where I was at the end. Strategy wise, I have no idea what I'm doing ever. So getting a bit of help from the team there, but yeah, was not expecting to end up there.
Yeah, still a decent redemptive effort in the end. Obviously, after how things played out yesterday, you were running pretty strongly at the front until a wheel failure in the first race for the grid. And the safety car in the second race definitely curtailed Kurt's ability to recover from that. But in the end, to still walk away with third is a good haul of points.
Yeah, well, I had to run down to Super Cheap Auto this morning and bloody buy a new torque wrench because the clamp on my wheel, it was sliding the shaft out and it was losing connection. So I went down and got a torque wrench, tightened down the bolt, and then it must have fixed it. So yeah, Kurt did really well this morning to bring it back, and obviously the result shows that.
Absolutely. A good little cheeky plug for the sponsor that you have on your car, but you don't actually have on your car. But yeah, great way for the pair of you guys. What's the, I know we've got a Supercars round coming up next, and actually we'll talk on that quickly. I mean, you had a pretty good willing battle there with your team boss, Brenton Foley. How's it going to feel then going back into the same team as him for the next Supercars round?
I think it'll be all right. I don't know about on Foley's side, but it seems all right from my end. Maybe the other side of the Enduro team might have some problems, but I didn't really, so should be all right over in Simmons.
Oh, good. And then I was leaning into your thoughts coming into Bathurst.
Holy hell, I've got no idea what I'm doing, but yeah, it should be right.
Fair enough, Zach. Well, great work tonight. I've done it again today by yourself and by Kurt Stenberg, who seems to be unable to join us. But great work by the pair of you guys. Obviously, we'll catch you back at Simmons, and we'll see the pair of you back at Bathurst.
Yep. Thanks, mate.
Alrighty, we have got next the sole two-driver pairing that has made an appearance with Foley and Boki, and we might start with Boki, considering in fact we had a good chance to talk to Foley yesterday. So, Boki, you probably, from what I understand, you were a bit surprised coming into today with how well Foley had done last night.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. A little bit not surprised, I guess, but he started at the back. In 16 laps, I think it was, I checked it when I was out, and then it was 4 or 5 laps to go, and he was sitting third, so I was like, holy shit, we're in for a big day tomorrow.
Well, yeah, and as I understand, yeah, you and Foley both had a big night, so perhaps probably not the best preparation, but in the end, maybe it was the best preparation, because coming home with second and after the end of all, that's a pretty good run.
Well, it seems to be that the lack of preparation we have, the better we do, so I'm thinking I won't practice at all for Bathurst, and we might win it.
Fair enough. Well, swinging over now to Foley. In the end, it came down to a hard slog at the end there, Foley, but you managed to get the job done.
That battle was one of the most enjoyable races I've had in a very long time. It was really fun.
Absolutely. And yeah, great squabble at the end between yourself, Tim Redmond, Zach Brown, and Lewis Wedding did make an appearance, but unfortunately bowled a little wide and wasn't quite able to complete the picture. But yeah, great squabble there between some of the top runners in the Supercars Championship.
Yeah, always fun to battle them. We always leave good room, and we touch doors a bit, but we always try and keep it as fair as possible. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. I don't know who was more stressed, me or Phil, watching that battle.
Alrighty. I suppose same with I'll tell you the same question through to Zach. Not that we're trying to start anything. We all onto the one team banner at the end of the day. But things will be all good for you stepping back alongside Zach Brown after you guys trying to knock wing mirrors off each other at Sandown.
No issues at all. That was, if anything, I'm looking forward to do it again because that was so much fun.
And I suppose from the pair of you, I'll get your thoughts first. But thoughts coming into Bathurst.
Love Bathurst, but anytime Phil and I have teamed up to do it, it hasn't really ended well. So we're going to try and end that kind of bad streak that we have, and yeah, try and break the curse. But we always love Bathurst, and we'll give it a red hot go.
Fair enough. Pokey, your thoughts on that?
Bring it on. It'll be good fun. We can't go worse than
Absolutely.
we did last year because last year we got nowhere. So I think the year before we had issues as well. So yeah, it hasn't been kind. We always seem to have an issue. So, I mean, perfect time to turn it around.
Absolutely. Well, great work by the pair of you today, and you walk away with second in the Enduro Cup Championship and a big haul of teams points for PBF France Engineering as well. We will catch the pair of you at Simmons Plains in a few weeks' time.
Thank you.
And finally, we've got the sole representative from the Real Hot and Pixel Racing team, defending Enduro Cup Teams champions and getting back into it pretty well with a win at the end of the day. Brendan Ross, great work by yourself, and Luke Rosella.
Yeah, pretty good win. Not the best ideal start to the weekend, considering what happened yesterday with me wobbling. Luke just prioritising Port Adelaide yesterday, but to start from the rear today and then even just the lap one tiff. I was a little bit nervous passing some people throughout the laps, but I'm quite happy to end my stint where I did, and then just hand it over to Luke for Luke to finish the job, which he does a mega job all the time. He's super fast, and I could have left it in last place, and he probably still would have drove through the field. He's that good.
Yeah, very strong driver in the end. I think we measured at the end. He was something like 20 seconds up on Foley after the last safety car. So that's pretty strong running in the end. The next thought for you guys is going to be Simmons, but also the big thought for you guys now is Teams Championship with a double DNF for the lead series cars. You guys are very much in the picture now.
Yeah, I didn't even consider that. I know we've always focused on teams, but teams just cropped up on me then, so that's actually good for us. But probably in Bathurst, I'd definitely probably want to clean up some things we did today. We sort of Lewis was sort of put in an unfortunate position all race where he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. That last safety car hurt him because him and Hans were probably on for the win, if not second, just based on Luke's pace, just because them going into hard tyres and they were in a really good position. Zach was there too. Like he was talking about, he did a mega job today. But Bathurst, I think Luke's always mega around there. I've got fairly handy pace. And Lewis and Hans are always there. And when Stenny comes back, Stenny did a mega job today too. Yeah, we should be looking fairly good for Bathurst, but I better look for a bit of wood because I don't want to jinx anything.
Fair enough. Well, I think you've answered most things I was going to throw at you, Rossi. I'll leave you to go now and join Luke in whatever celebrations he's currently partaking in.
Thank you. I just got to do the old Craiglands faithful and just say hi to Dad in the lounge room who's been in the chat all day and the Chappie boys at home.
I was going to say I did see a Ross in the chat, and I figured you've linked it off to the fan members. So good to see.
He's my
your father,
biggest
Chris.
fan.
Yeah, good to see your father, Chris, in the chat. We'll give him a shout out. But
cheers, boys.
great work by yourself, Rossi. We'll catch you at Simmons Plains in a few weeks' time.
And Levi and Chile.
Alrighty, that's been our podium sitters for the Sandown 400.
Thanks very much, Rody. As always, great to have you aboard. And well, for those of you that are playing along at home and you keep an eye on the Supercars calendar, and you have noticed that this is a part of the Supercars Championship, the whole circus picks up and moves on to Symmons Plains in a couple of weeks' time. For the Development Series drivers, that means they're going to be tackling Symmons Plains on Friday, September the 22nd. So that is approximately, or just a little under 2 weeks from now. And the main game will be tackling it on September 29th. So that is actually the in Victoria, that is the AFL Grand Final public holiday weekend that a lot of people actually don't think should be a public holiday, but we apparently need to be the same as New South Wales and have a holiday for a football match. So that's how that all pans out. For the Development Series drivers, it's actually going to be a pair of 75-kilometre 32-lap races with a 45-minute time limit. And then when you take a look at it from the Supercars perspective, it's going to be 3 50-kilometre sprint races. So back to sprint racing at its finest at the very, very short Symmons Plains Raceway. And then we get to the Bathurst round of the Enduro Cup, the crown jewel in ASR Supercars, which is the Development Series, October 13, or Friday the 13th. That's a bit of a bad omen. And then you've got the 14th and the 15th, which is the 500 itself, qualifying on the Saturday, and the top 10 shootout, and then the 500-kilometre enduro on the Sunday. So until next time, goodbye everybody. Please drive safely, and we'll see you for the next one.